Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Select Board meeting for Tuesday, August 27th in the Clark Room at Town Hall. It's also online on Zoom. We will just go over the agenda briefly. Actually, let me first take a roll call vote. It looks like we only have 4 people here.
Is David David's probably on his way.
He's probably on his way, but when we'll start the meeting in any event.
With a roll call.
Roll call vote.
Arnold here.
I guess I'm next. Reed here.
Snell here.
Triola here.
All right, and then David is out in the parking lot. Oh, popped on?
There he is.
Oh, yeah, David. You present?
Not-
I don't know if you can hear us, but somehow signal if you want to be included.
Do we know if they're here?
I can hear you. I'm
Okay,
here.
okay, thank you, David. All right, so we have a quorum, we have all members in attendance. Just to quickly go over tonight's agenda, we'll have community input, then appointments. We're going to review the town administrator bylaw draft and discuss that. Then we're going to discuss the select board goals along with some sub-points there. Then we're going to have a discussion of ARPA and review at 9 p.m. The town administrator evaluation, initial discussion at 9:20, and then the town administrator report at 9:30. We're going to quickly do a one-day liquor license, warrants and minutes, cemetery deeds, and liaison reports. It's possible, depending on our timing, we'll finish early, but those are famous last words. All right. So why don't we get started? Is there any community input? Is there anyone? There's nobody physically present in the audience here tonight, but is there anyone online who would like to make a comment? All right.
Sounds like somebody's got a parakeet.
David? All right, well, seeing none, we will move on to the appointments section.
Do you want me to make the motion?
Sure, if you want to start with a motion, and we'll ask Ryan to discuss a little bit.
All right. I move to appoint Sandra Favell? How do you say her last name?
I think you got it the second time.
Favell. To the position of dispatcher for the Communications Department pending required hiring administration with an anticipated start date of September 3, 2024.
Second.
All right, Mr. Town Administrator, you want to tell us?
Yes, so the hiring team, which consists of the chiefs, members of the communication department, and Aubrey, interviewed Sandra. She's an excellent candidate, business owner, has CPR certification. She does not, interestingly, it's been a while since we've hired someone without the dispatch certification. So she'll be going to the dispatch academy or the communications academy in the month of September through the middle of October, and then she'll start a pretty intensive internal training program, be ready to go by Thanksgiving. So this is probably more likely the way we're hiring dispatch in the next 5 to 10 years, which is bringing in promising candidates like Sandra, training them, and hoping they stay for quite a while with their experience.
Great. Any questions, comments? All right, let's do a roll call vote on the motion.
Arnold, aye.
David, you're next in the alphabet. Okay, I'll go ahead.
Okay.
Break in when you can, David. Reed, aye.
Snell,
Model I, Model I.
Great,
I
thank you.
can't, I gotta do some things here that are noisy, so I can't toggle that well.
Sounds interesting, David.
Let the minutes reflect that, please.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Snell, aye.
Triola, aye.
Okay, so it was unanimous. All right, we have a discussion after this of the TA bylaw, but I have invited our attorneys, our town attorney, to just briefly join, and that starts at 7:15. So we have a few minutes. We can move on to something else in the agenda if there's warrants and minutes, maybe, or is there anything else? Or the one-day liquor license?
Let's do the one-day liquor license.
One-day liquor license.
That's number 8.
Yeah.
I move to approve the application submitted by Mary Carroll of Clark Farm Market for the issuance of a one-day special license to sell beer and cider at an event to be held on September 21st, 2024, during the hours of 3 p.m. through 6 p.m. at 201 Bedford Road, Carlisle, Mass.
Oh, second it. All right.
Second.
Sorry.
That's okay. All right. I saw this in the packet. I don't know if there are any questions.
I always look to see that the police chief has put a stamp of approval on it,
did
and
put
he
it-
did.
Yep.
And they usually can only get their insurance after they get the license, so it's, anyway,
Okay.
it looked good to me.
Yep.
This looks fun.
Yep.
Cornhole.
Yeah. Have you done it? Previous?
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, I've not done this.
Yeah. Okay. Roll call vote.
Arnold, I.
Modell, aye.
Reed, aye.
Snell, aye.
Triola, aye.
Great. Thank you. Do you want to go to the cemetery deed next?
Those are usually, all right. I move to transfer land in the public burial ground at the Green Cemetery described as follows. Deed 832, Lot D 412, Graves 1 and 2, to Brian First, formerly of 615 Bedford Road.
Second?
All right. Any questions, comments? All right. Seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote.
Arnold, I.
Modell, aye.
Reed, aye.
Snell, aye.
Triola, aye.
Okay, so we'll take care of that. All right, we have a few more minutes to go.
Want to do minutes?
We could do minutes, yeah.
Okay.
It's going to be a lightning round here.
Yeah.
I move to approve the minutes of August 8th and August 13th of 2024, Select Board meeting minutes as presented or amended.
Second.
Did everyone have a chance to review those? Any comments, amendments? No? Okay,
The only thing I should say is I was absent for the meeting on the 13th, so, but the vote is both of them together.
Yeah, so, it's all right.
You guys
Even
can
if
vote
you're
for it.
absent, you can always vote for minutes anyway. It does not require abstention, as long as you've read them
All right.
and feel that you want to approve them.
okay. So we'll do a roll call vote.
Arnold, I.
Modell, aye.
Reed, aye.
Snell, aye.
Triola, aye.
Okay. Wow, we are cruising through certain things.
Your system's paying off as we hop around.
Yes, sir, this is why I do it. And I have both of the systems on here, so.
Well, I can do a quick liaison report.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay. So the Community Preservation Committee is meeting this Thursday night, and we have only had two possible ideas come forward to us, or possibilities for grants, but we are going to decide whether or not to have a funding cycle for this fall town meeting, which I think we will, just because we have the time, since the meeting's not happening until November. And we're also then going to continue the conversation about the CPC strategy in terms of using CPC resources in a more planned way, including reviewing the discussion that we had with various boards and committees that came together for that meeting in July. So I'm looking forward to the discussion on Thursday night. And we'll let everybody know shortly thereafter if we're having a funding cycle and if we've heard more about specific grants that people are considering.
Great, thanks, Barney. Is there anything else? Any other? Okay.
Oops.
We do need to wait another 5 minutes or so, so
We can put the TA report.
did you want to start on that, or is that too disjointed to start on a TA report?
Go anywhere.
That'd be great. Why don't you get started and we'll
Let's roll.
I'll let you look over my shoulder. How's that?
What's the number?
Okay, so the packet does have a draft report and then the actual report, so if that's confusing
You're going the
too.
wrong way.
Yep,
Oh, they're both in here, okay.
yep, I saw,
You need, yeah.
I thought it was
That
last
number?
week's, last.
It's all right.
Doesn't
I'll get
say.
there. I'll get there.
So it starts on PDF 22.
Thank you. Got it.
Under events and town hall news, we had our employee appreciation event, August 21st at Kimball Farm. I do note in here that Travis did make fun of me in front of the entire staff for choosing soft serve ice cream over hard serve ice cream, so apparently I have a lot to learn about Carlisle still.
Soft yogurt at Kimball, which is,
Sorry. So I will get hard ice cream next time, I apologize.
I found out the hard way because I ordered soft serve one other night and I'm like, oh, it's yogurt. Not that there's anything wrong with yogurt.
So the point of the day, besides mocking me, was to honor and thank our employees for their hard work in Carlisle. And it was great to gather the staff. Thank you so much to the select board who stopped by and spoke with our employees. They definitely appreciated that. And I will also note that the police had an attendee at this. They had attendees at the senior one, and then they had their own event. So Kimball's is getting their money's worth out of the town hall staff. The hallway decorations, so you'll see in here, we're starting to put things back up and inviting organizations like the Historical Commission and the schools to participate in finding items of unique interest to Carlisle and putting them up on the walls. So now that we've redone the building and we've decorated a little bit, we want to put items of significance up. So Al gets a lot of credit for doing that work. We took a lot of it down. We're working on some of the plaques, combining them so that they're not as disjointed, and we'll keep all the old ones but display them in a way. Some of the examples are our Eagle Scouts, old road race winners, outstanding citizens, and conservationists of the year. So all of those plaques will return to the walls if anyone's been missing them. And we're working with the middle school for right over there above our friends with cable. We're going to have a competition or an art event in the middle school in order to ask students what they think of when they think of Carlisle, and hopefully get some entries and display them up on the wall here in the Clark room. Lastly, we've asked a couple residents to make sure that we have proper research and documentation for all the rooms that are named here in Town Hall. Make sure we have those histories so we can get them up online and in the rooms themselves. So some have pictures, some have histories. We want to make sure that every room has everything it needs to properly document the rooms that were named after famous Carlilians.
I do have a question to represent, in order to represent my grandchildren. What about the parade winners trophy?
Parade winners trophy.
It's supposed to be on display at Town Hall and list the winners.
And can I ask
Not-
how you win a parade?
Oh, the
You were
judges
the
vote.
judges vote in the Old Home Day Parade.
Oh, that's the best float?
The best
Uh-huh.
float. It's a annual competition.
And I have no self-interest just because our family won it the last 2 years.
I think you should recuse yourself.
Yes, yes.
Exactly.
I will find that trophy for you, Barney. Then just to finish this section here before I believe we'll be moving on, we talked about Sandra being appointed tonight. We have sent an offer letter for a planning, zoning, and land use assistant. So that will come to you at your next, actually, that won't come to you. That'll go to the planning board at their next meeting. And then we are continuing to take resumes or interview for DPW and facilities. And the only other open position we have right now, our full-time open position besides the DPW, is the Council on Aging Social Services Coordinator, which is being covered internally by staff right now, and pending conversations with the COHS and the Select Board. So that's the HR report from Aubrey.
Great. Thank you, Ryan. And we'll continue later on?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So it's just about 7:15.
Ethan's on.
Yep, and I see Ethan Dively is on. He is town council with the town of Carlisle. We're now going to move on to a discussion of the town administrator bylaw. We have had a draft that was put together. We discussed it at the last meeting, and we just said we would come back and review it again and determine if it's something that we wanted to move forward and how we might want to do that. And so to kind of further that discussion, I had suggested that we have town council just give us a quick overview of this. It may be helpful to us, and then if there are any questions, we can ask of council those questions. So I'll turn it over to Ethan. Why don't you kind of help kick us off here?
Thanks very much, Travis. For those who I haven't met, if there's anybody, Ethan Dively, Associate Town Council. Happy to speak to you all this evening about the Town Administrator bylaw. I've only just reviewed the draft that I think you guys will be discussing, but to sort of begin at a high level, sort of the rationale for doing this, you have a spectrum of options, right? So as it exists now, you have no bylaw, and you hire a town administrator who does a great job doing everything that you task him with. Moving a little bit further along the spectrum, you can adopt a bylaw which explains what the expected sort of obligations, tasks, and responsibilities of that town administrator are. Now, in doing so, Select Board cedes some of its authority to the town administrator through an act of town meeting by formalizing that in a bylaw. Basically, anything that the Select Board could assign informally to the town administrator can be put into a bylaw so that it becomes his or her formal responsibilities. Now, there's a couple of reasons to do that. One of them I like is that a couple of years down the road, when the people who are making the decisions today aren't around anymore, we'll know, because it's written into the bylaw, what the town administrator is empowered to do and typically has done. Another one is that by putting his or her rights and obligations in the bylaw itself, it requires an act of town meeting to modify that. So, said another way, as it stands now, whoever may be on the Select Board decides what the TA does. Putting it into the bylaw makes it town meeting's decision and makes it somewhat harder to change. One of the limitations with going with the bylaw is that we can't give the town administrator any rights that would affect other statutory boards. So for example, Board of Health, Planning Board, other boards that have the right to make their own decisions and hire their own staff. We can't sort of assign the TA to do anything that is within their purview. Moving a little bit further along the spectrum, we could adopt a bylaw and pair it with a special legislation request to the state legislature, which could allow some of those statutory board powers to be passed on to the town administrator if you wanted that role to have sort of a broader departmental control, for example, again, over things like Board of Health, Planning Board, that sort of thing. Moving one step further, if you were going to make some really broad changes that affect basically all aspects of the town's operation, you could adopt a charter, and that would give you even more flexibility in terms of how you define local government and how it operates. I think in the case of a conversation limited to the town administrator, probably the charter would be a tall ask and sort of beyond the scope of what's needed. But so those are sort of the four options: no bylaw, a bylaw with a special act that adds some non-statutory powers to the TA's role, or a charter. I guess I'll leave it there for the moment. That's sort of the big picture, sort of the options that you have to break out the TA's rights, responsibilities, that sort of thing. But it's really up to the Select Board at the moment to determine sort of how they view the TA's role as a town employee, as a town administrator. And then ultimately, if you put a bylaw to town meeting, it becomes the town meeting members' decision as to how much responsibility or otherwise the TA's could have.
All
I'm
right.
happy to answer any questions, or I'm here to help, so.
I have a general question. I know every town does things differently. In general, or are there any statistics on how many towns have nothing versus a bylaw versus special legislation? I'm fairly new to this conversation, so I'm just curious what's the norm, if any, or is it pretty much just all over the map?
So I guess I would say it's very all over the map. We work with communities that have no bylaws, some that have bylaws, some that have charters. It's really widespread. I would say that Carlisle's general bylaws are sort of well-served in that they're very simple. It's easy to understand. It is a little unusual that the town administrator doesn't have a sort of section reference in the general bylaws that at least explain a little bit about what the role is. Certainly, that's within the select board's purview, and things have been going well so far, but it is nice when we have questions about sort of whose responsibilities are being discussed when something comes up. You can look to the bylaws and use them as a reference. So I would say distribution of authority is all over the map, but it's a little bit unusual that Carlisle doesn't have any mention of the town administrator in the bylaws. I looked at it this afternoon, and I think the position is referenced twice in the personnel bylaw section, but doesn't otherwise come up. So it might be might be good to consider adding something, even if it's just to acknowledge the position and sort of a brief statement of the job description. But again, it's totally up to you.
Any other questions for Ethan? I know I was thinking about what, if you do this and you have a town meeting and they do adopt this, and we wanted to change it. So say, for instance, the TA, that structure didn't work out, what is necessary to undo that? Can the
Sure.
town vote, or if you have to go to an act of legislature, how do we undo that?
So I guess starting on the simpler end first, if you folks put a warrant article for a general bylaw amendment on the town meeting warrant, and it passes and some time goes by and we decide, not we, but the town decides that you'd like a different structure, all it takes is an amendment to that general bylaw. So it can happen at any town meeting, has to go through the standard approval process by the Attorney General's municipal law unit, but otherwise it doesn't happen immediately, so it can't be as simple as the select board taking a vote, but within one town meeting cycle, so 6 months or so, you could incorporate changes that revert back to the way it was before, or sort of modify any changes that you've adopted that weren't working or should be further enhanced, I guess. In the event that you go for a special act, probably the language of the request to the legislature would provide the form of the bylaw stating the rights that the town administrator would have, and we'd be asking that the legislature approve the adoption of this bylaw, which therefore allows the additional rights to be conferred on the TA that the select board couldn't otherwise do. So waiting until the legislature does that would take a little bit of time, and then once it's in place, the TA would have the powers that we've requested them to have. To undo that, I don't want to say too much because I haven't had a reason to think about it, quite frankly, but I think taking the powers away is a much simpler thing to do by town meeting. So it is in the general bylaw. You could amend the general bylaw to remove that authority. I'm not going to say there would never be a reason that we'd have to go back to the legislature, but I do think if the TA was given powers and the town decided to change their mind, a general bylaw removing the authority would be within town meeting's purview.
Or even just amending, I mean, obviously, we periodically amend bylaws. If it were the special legislation, is amending something not related to the additional powers, something that's just done at town meeting, or does that then, every time you change a word or a specific sub-bullet, does it have to go back through legislature?
I think it would, the only questions that would have to go to the legislature would be those that exceed statutory authority. So if you are amending it to reduce the grant of authority to the TA, I don't think that would have to go back to the legislature.
Or if you were amending a part not pertinent to that piece of it, it wouldn't? wouldn't necessarily have to go back. Okay.
Right, so what we'd be looking for is anything that exceeds what's allowed by statute. And so depending on what you're amending, it's possible, but again, if it's not related to that, that which the legislature had to approve, I think it would be okay.
So I have a question. When you read this draft bylaw, did you see sections that you felt exceeded statutory authorization that would require this particular one to go to the state for special legislation?
And that's the question I haven't had quite enough time to answer just yet, Kate.
Okay, well, but there's nothing
but-
that's popped out and said, oh my God, what are they doing here? You know?
No, nothing jumped out as being totally off the wall or in any way out of the norm. I think we might want to be a little bit careful about how we describe the authority over various department heads and personnel in a bylaw like this. Because again, there are statutory boards that have their own hiring authority. I joined the meeting as we were talking about an assistant position that might be reviewed by the planning board. Those boards do have independent authority, and I think if we were going to give the TA control over staff hired by those statutory boards, that would probably need to go to the legislature.
Okay, I don't,
So if you look at 3.3.3, which is about the performance review process, I'm just curious whether the item 2 under that, which says that the TA would be responsible for making sure that all employees have a performance review, and including elected town board, either to an appointed or elected town board commission. And so,
it doesn't say he's doing the
does
review, it just says
right,
he's.
it just says, but you
ensuring that it-
ensure that it gets done.
Well, the more pertinent one is 3.3.2B.
Yeah, right.
This is sort of, that's in the
Oh, the
window dressing.
working conditions.
Conditions, yes.
Yeah.
So, Ethan, let me ask you a few questions about that. So if,
Sure.
if, as written, it would need to go to the MGL, and can you give us an idea of a couple things? How long does it take, like, to get on their calendar, and then what do they do? And secondly, if there are boards within Carlisle that oppose it, which I'm guessing there would be, do they petition the MGL too? And what does the MGL do when, select board wants something but somebody else doesn't? Do they just say, well, you guys go sort it out and come back? I mean, how does that generally work?
Sure. So the way this process would start would be with a town meeting warrant article authorizing the select board to petition the legislature for this change. And so I guess the first hurdle would be collecting a majority vote of the members of town meeting. And so I think generally when you can assemble a majority of town meeting to approve this kind of change, that's strong evidence for the legislature that even if there are groups or boards or factions within the community that don't support it, that's strong evidence that the town meeting members at large do. How long it takes, it varies a lot. It depends on when the vote at town meeting is taken and how quickly the petition can be submitted and where we are in the legislative session. I've seen it can take 6 months to a year, and then for some that are more complicated, this wouldn't be a complicated one, I don't think. They can take even longer. This is a good example of a situation where the community's relationship with their local reps at the State House is really important because it's got to be on their radar. It's the sort of thing that it'll move more quickly if it gets attention. And so sort of the squeaky wheel gets the grease kind of situation when the legislature has many different petitions like this to consider. As to how they would respond to sort of opposition from other town boards, I can't really say. Certainly, if there are boards that are actively lobbying the legislature to avoid this, that would be a concern, and I think would merit conversation with your local rep who's going to be trying to advance it.
So just to build on that, a couple things. One is, so you're saying we need to build advocacy with our local rep, and we're talking about the Simon, not Mike, right? At the
State
At the
legislature.
state legislature level, not the Senate, right? And then secondly, Like, can you give us a feel, like, how often does it happen, and do they tend to clump all these kind of things together in one session and move through them quickly? I mean, I imagine for most members, legislature members, other people's, is it a home rule petition? I'm not sure what we call it, but
That's what we're talking
other
about.
people's home rule petitions are pretty administrative, right? They're going to vote what their rep recommends and not, I mean, I'm thinking it's not controversial to some other district, like, so how do they treat all those when they have a whole bunch of them? Are there a lot of them every session? Do they clump them together? Do you have any sense of that?
Yeah, I mean, they do. They sort of lump them together, and I think there's a hearing date typically in January or February of every year where legislation that's going to be advanced does, and then it almost always resolves by the end of the legislative calendar at the end of July. So more or less, they do get lumped together and sort of voted at the same time.
So, all right, so you're saying, for example, if we have a Springtown meeting, well, I guess it wouldn't matter if it went to the fall, but at some point we vote in a town meeting, spring or fall, it probably takes till the next cycle to get it into some next cycle legislative calendar, in which case they would kind of, in the middle of that session, which is the January, February, they would have a hearing, and then, like the Supreme Court, they would announce their decision in the,
If we did
springtime.
it this
So it's
fall, we
like
could have it
a year. It's basically a year, I would say.
Well, not if we start now in November.
No, if we
It's
start now in
around
November, it'll be a year
February.
and a half, I think, and if we start in the spring, it'll be a year. I bet you
So
a
I
dollar.
don't want to say definitively that it will all resolve at the end of the next legislative calendar year, but because I have seen them move more quickly, but cautiously, I would say you should expect a year.
Okay.
Right, okay.
And I guess one thing I could add is that you can, to some degree, you can split the difference. You could adopt a bylaw now that confers the powers that you can give by bylaw, and then pair it with a home rule petition that would add to that bylaw.
Right.
In the event of, or at the time that it is passed by the legislature. So
Yeah.
you could have paragraphs A through D
Yep.
that get passed by town meeting now, and then E, F, and G or so that would be incorporated when the legislature acts on them. So you could break it up like that so that you're not waiting indefinitely for the whole thing to take effect.
Right, that's a good idea. So, in your spectrum, Ethan, of, do nothing to do lots of things, and the lots of things side is like edging into town manager status, right? I mean,
Sure,
essentially,
that's-
at the end of that line is a town manager. Do town managers have authority over all, like, how does it work? Because again, like, Simon's a Concord guy, right? So he's going to look at what he knows about Concord. The town manager in Concord, does he have authority, or she, is it a she now?
It's a she.
Have authority over, like, the Board of Health? Like, how does that work now?
Sure. So it's specialized based on charters. So we're talking about adopting a town charter in this situation, which could provide for a town manager. And when you get to that level, you form a charter commission that sort of does a deep dive onto what the town wants to do in terms of its overall governmental operations. And you can really do any number of different things. I am aware of town manager positions out there. Some are strong, some are less so, and in some cases they have hiring and firing authority over very nearly all support staff. So the kind of positions that would otherwise be hired by statutory boards. So yeah, sorry, it's a long way of saying that it varies a lot. And the nice thing about the charter process is while it's sort of costly and time consuming, it gives you a lot of control over the way you'd like your government to operate.
That's a 4 to 5 year process.
Yeah, no, I'm asking,
willing
I'm not
to
actually,
embark on that.
I'm not actually asking to advocate it for Carlisle. What I'm saying is that our neighbor, which we constantly compare ourselves with, and in fact, where Simon is from, has something, and I wonder what that something is.
They have a town manager, and they've had it for eons.
What's their charter? What's the authority of that manager? I mean, we don't have to answer it here, but I'm just saying, it sounds to me like the process is to build advocacy with Simon, make a case. And we should know what comparables are doing, those that have, TAs and those that have TMs.
I gathered something a little different, just more
Yeah.
that it's maybe not perfunctory, but it's a routine thing, then that they package these together. And if a town wants to do whatever we want to do, I think that, our rep would support, because this is our home decision. It's what we
Yeah.
want, and I don't think there's anything
Yeah,
controversial.
I don't think
Okay.
Simon would want to stick his
Right.
oar in around that.
Right.
Okay.
I think we'd want to just make sure we're on Simon's radar and he's aware that this,
Yeah.
if this were to go forward and pass, that this is a high priority for the town, and we'd appreciate.
Yeah, fair.
And is it just the state rep, or is our state senator also Barrett involved?
I think it's largely your state rep where this
Okay.
begins.
Okay.
So can I ask maybe it's an overly simplistic question, but in this draft, there's a bunch of stuff that the town administrator does now that we could put into a bylaw, and you were mentioning the additional powers that would require the legislative action. Is there a simple list of planning board, Board of Health? There's language in here that accepts police chief, fire chief. Is there a list of what those things are that would not be currently under, that would require the legislative action and potentially could be broken out into a separate question for the town?
Sure. So I guess I'll say there isn't a simple list. There is a statutory authorization for the town administrator, and it basically says that they can be empowered to do anything that the select board can do. And so I guess if you folks think about it this way, all of the decisions that you are tasked with making on an annual basis can more or less be assigned to the town administrator, and those are the roles and responsibilities that could be incorporated into a bylaw. So the decisions that you see throughout the year that you don't get to make, similarly wouldn't be eligible for inclusion in a bylaw without seeking an act of the legislature. Certainly, if it would be helpful to work up a list, that's something that we can provide some assistance with, so that you have a broader sense of what wouldn't be on the table, at least for a simple town meeting vote to adopt a bylaw.
Okay. I guess, I just said, go
So,
ahead.
The question about Concord, so I can tell you there's 351 versions of this, but, so the select board in Concord appoints a library committee, planning board, board of appeals, the town accountant, and a personnel board, where the town manager appoints a town clerk, treasurer, town collector, the board of assessors, and then all of those have to be approved by the select board. And then all officers, boards, committees, and employees of the town, with the exception of elected officials,
So staff of elected officials are under the town manager.
except for the accountant.
Okay, interesting.
Probably because of the accountant at the time they wrote the charter.
You had a question? I wanted, but go ahead, Kate.
Yeah, mostly it's the 3.3.3B, working conditions, working hours, holidays, and vacation days for all department heads and other employees. I mean, because, there's a statutory, I get it, the Board of Health and Planning Board can hire their staff, but then there's that kind of HR area. And part of this was trying to clarify those lines of chain of command, so to speak.
That's the question, is it in the gray area, or is it on one
Yeah,
side or
the question
the
is
other?
it black and white, or is it gray, or is it, just verboten?
There's two anecdotes I'd like to point out there. So the more prescriptive you get with the hiring, like you can do vacation hours but not compensation, will greatly complicate the hiring process. So if you really like the qualifications of a person, but one person is holding the key to accruals and other things, then it's going to make the hiring process very complicated.
I don't think Kate's going that way. I think what we're trying to say is, if we divide, correct me if I'm wrong, but if we try to do what Ethan's recommending, we place in a vote the things that are clear, that are clearly things we can vote on,
Not me.
and then have them vote on going to the MGL for the other stuff, is the care and feeding of all employees, including those hired by independent boards. Is that in Select Board's bucket, or is it in the MGL's bucket?
Yeah, that's exactly the question.
So Ethan, back to you.
But I'm a practitioner, not a,
No, we understand you don't want
what
to
I'm
split the
saying is
baby.
it doesn't work. So if you have split powers, it will not work.
No, but we're not, you're not going the right way. We're saying we need to have something for a year or two while they chew over this thing. Is that piece in the thing that we ask the town to pass, or is it in the thing we petition the MGL to pass?
I
And the
think,
thing is not the hiring and firing and all that stuff in 3.3.2, but the day-to-day, thou shalt show up at 8 AM and all that kind of stuff.
well, it might be helpful, because this is kind of the discussion, is to, have the board talk about what we want in terms of this document and the policy, and then we'll have council review and
Yeah, but
kind of
first,
get back.
honestly,
But I think
I'd like
that
to have my
question is
answered
important.
by council, because nobody's let him answer yet.
Okay.
And I have asked the question, and I would like to have an answer.
Fair enough, Kate.
Thank you.
All right.
Sure, so I think, I mean, it's already in the town's general bylaws. Personnel policies are under the purview of the town administrator. I think a lot of the things that we're talking about here are not prohibited by the sort of independent statutory authority of the other boards. But it might be something we want to think a little bit more closely about to make sure we're not stepping on toes and we have a bylaw that we can defend, because there are gray areas here, and certainly if there is concern from the other boards who have hiring authority that they may want to assert more control, but we want to head that off. So I'm going to say, I think what you drafted at 3.3.3B, I think is what we're speaking about, probably is okay on its own, but we want to think a little more closely about it. And I do appreciate Travis's suggestion that we sort of work on this as a two-step process where the select board coalesces around the decisions they'd like to make, and then council can be involved to review it, to provide some advice on whether or not what has been worked up is acceptable as a bylaw, or if any of the portions would have to go to the State House.
Okay.
All right. Unless there are any other specific, go ahead.
So one last question, strong chief. So we have a strong fire chief, and there's a carve out here, but I'm just not so much focused on what we've written, but just the strong chief, as I understand it, we still have, select board still has hiring and firing authority, but it's just very difficult, right?
Of the chief?
Yeah, if you have a strong chief.
We have a
So-
contract, and I think we have,
No, but if even, there's something about strong chief that makes it pretty hard to,
It's everyone else in the fire department.
no, but let's talk about the chief.
Well,
I
that's what I
mean-
mean, that's what strong chief is. So you could hire and fire the chief, but the chief has full authority over.
Oh, okay. So that's similar then, if we were to change that, and again, I'm not suggesting we do, but if we were to change that to give you that authority, then that would be an MGL thing, right? Because we don't have that authority. Is that fair to say?
So the question is specifically about the fire chief position?
No, I guess I'm being told that it's about the fire department staff and not the chief. It's kind of like the, planning board.
Because
why
the
we
way to,
carved it out.
maybe another way to say it is, we would like it to operate the way the police department does.
If we want to
If,
have it that way.
if we wanted to do that,
That would be an MGL thing because we don't have that authority with a strong chief. Is that a fair summary?
I will say I'd have to look a little more closely at how we arrived at the strong chief position that the town has already.
Okay.
There may be other alternatives to requiring special legislation, but
Okay,
generally, based on what you said, yes.
thank you.
all right. I actually think we should move into more of a policy discussion of this, and
it's
I
very
just
helpful.
thought
Yeah.
Ethan would be helpful to have
Thank you, Ethan.
present, but.
You didn't have to get dressed up for us, but you look very crisp. You look very crisp.
I thought he looked handsome.
He looks great. No, he looks great.
Great. He looks like he's doing his
You look
job.
like Central Casting. Here's my counsel, and he's.
It's great.
Just want to make sure you guys are getting your money's worth.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Ethan. Appreciate your time.
All right, thank you all, and certainly let me know if you have any questions or want further discussion on particular policy questions here.
Sounds
And
good.
then we'll get back to you once we've ironed out sort of what it is we want.
Yep.
And, great, start the process. Okay.
All right.
Great.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Have a nice
Ethan.
evening.
Good night.
All right. So, I think we kind of need to step away from this, or the minutia, and just step back and say, we're to kind of remind us all why we're doing this. I mean, this kind of came out of initially the, task force, the, Kate, you want to?
Yes.
Governance.
Town government.
Town government, well, no, actually, I would say it came from before that, when David and I had weekly meetings with the land use board chairs, and we felt that there were things that we wanted for the town to operate more efficiently in permitting and that stuff, and that nobody had any control over any of the staff in certain respects, and the staff didn't have to talk to one another, and unless the boards directed them to. So there were issues around, and that nobody had been evaluated for a long time. So out of those discussions, and correct me, jump in anytime you want, David, came an evaluation matrix and goal-setting exercises for the staff, and the governance committee, because this group said, well, this is not just, in these departments, it's sort of town-wide, and there needs to be a way of having a personnel function be fulfilled, because we had no personnel function in the town. And that it had to be, any personnel function that we established, which should be uniform across all staff of the town, so that nobody would be treated differently, because that creates dissension and low morale among staff, and that's how we got here, because it kind of came out of the personnel
Right, so
bylaw.
what happened positively, in other words, things that we talked about 3 or 4 years ago that have now come to pass,
Probably
5 years ago, whatever it was,
6 years ago.
a more unified system, definitely the performance reviews, the goal setting, definitely the governance committee itself, an HR person in Aubrey. I mean, again, this is
Yeah.
all stuff that came out that we didn't have, better HR policies, which you guys drafted. But what didn't happen, and it's still not really happening to at least my satisfaction, is cross-use of staff. Particularly, we had focused on the land use boards because that was the kind of the low-hanging fruit in terms of staffs that have sort of common things going on. You could make the same case of other functions. I think now that we've had Ryan for a couple of years, a lot of the other functions have just naturally moved to cross-training and more efficiency. And that group, which is really where we started, and I'm not going to point any specific fingers, those boards just haven't really kind of meshed in the way
Still
that
having
we think they
difficulty.
should. And so I'd say so that is like still not done, let's call it that. And then the larger issue, besides codifying what the TA should do, which I think is a good just housekeeping anyway, is if these little towns like us are going to survive independently, and every survey we do points to the desire by the people to maintain our Carlisle character and independence, we got to find more efficient ways. And labor remains the biggest single cost. And if you can't do it more efficiently, if there's friction in that system, it's going to hurt us as a town. So I think, from my view, strategically, it's pretty important if you take the long view of the survivability of independent towns.
All right. So it's really a policy discussion for us as to what we want to do, for how we want to run the government, or, the government, and ultimately it'll be the people at town meeting to decide if they are on board with this. But I think that Ethan pointed out, and I think it's a really good point, is we need to bring into the discussion other boards and committees who would be affected by this, and make sure, we get all the input we want and need prior to going forward with it. But, it becomes a question. The two things that I've been thinking about is, one, are we comfortable as a board with this kind of draft? And we can obviously massage it a little bit and have council review it more. But as far as the powers themselves that we're planning to delegate to the town administrator, and then the second is, as far as how we want to go about that, and do we want to try and do that at the fall town meeting, or do we want to wait till the spring town meeting? And so if, just from a process standpoint, and I had asked, I guess, the TA about this, I think, I do, as a board, think that, it's great that I'm very pleased, I'm just going public saying, I'm pleased with our TA. I think that in this discussion, it really is about the board, because the TA, this is I wouldn't say it's self-interested, but it's a bylaw that would affect the TA directly. And so, sure, we can ask for input, but I think it's important that our board just discuss this. But anyway, I had asked the TA about the timing of this as far as the fall town meeting, and he had said, and you can weigh in if you'd like, on, that if we don't have this, we may not have enough meat for a fall town meeting, just because there may not be enough content. And so it's just something to consider, and that's just an opinion. It's not we ultimately will have to make that judgment. But
Yeah, I'm always about shooting at the king and missing, right? Because it does set you back a cycle. When you get rejected, you're back in a long cycle to bring it back. You shouldn't, I think, at least in my opinion, immediately bring it back in the next meeting. You got to kind of rebuild your advocacy. And I think this is going to take a fair amount of advocacy. I totally support it. But I am concerned that fall town meetings anyway, I think there's a good reason why there's usually not a fall town meeting. And one of them is, like, people come back, like right now, coming back from vacation, getting their brains wrapped around, school and kids and da-da-da-da. And then, there's holidays. It's not great for really building advocacy on issues. It's just not. And this is a meaty issue. So my personal opinion is we absolutely should do it, and we should take our time doing it.
So
Go ahead.
Think about this practically is, there's a lot in here that I don't think is controversial. I think it's as we operate now, and it's as we'll operate while this board's still intact anyway, to the end of the year. So practically speaking, all the non-controversial stuff, we do need to get it into a bylaw, we do need to codify it, but we don't need to get it approved by town meeting between now and then, because we have the authority now. We just really want to get it on the book. So I think it's really comes down to the additional things that would require potentially legislative action. And if those will require advocacy, and I do think we do need time to do that. So, we should discuss it. We should really spend some time with the boards to figure out really what the right description is here. But I do think it points towards a spring town meeting. And in the interim, we can codify what we're doing now, fine-tune it, and collect whatever data or anecdotes we need to get it passed in the spring.
Couple thoughts. One is, I thought you were heading in the direction of saying, so we take the parts that are
We
not
could.
controversial.
We could,
and
if we were- if
think
it-
about those as going on the fall town meeting, and I would support that for a couple of reasons. One, I think spring town meeting is usually very full, right? And we want this. It'd be an opportune time, actually, to have this get some real attention. And secondly, I think some of the parts of this that, as you say, are non-controversial, and in a lot of cases, are already in place, thanks to the, some of the new staff that we've brought on board in the last couple of years. I'd like to see that get approved sooner rather than later, so it's done and it's established for the future, and then we can take the pieces that are going to be either more complicated or will require legislative action. spend the time working on that. And maybe we have something for the Springtown meeting, or maybe we don't on those, depending on, what response we're getting from people. And another thought I have is, we might want to figure out a way to discuss some of these pieces that involve some of the elected boards. Just go ahead and initiate some of those conversations, just to see where people are, and what does it, because it may be that there's agreement on some of these things, given the experience some boards have been having over the last couple of years. So I don't know what other folks think about that, but I could imagine doing just a testing the waters kind of conversation, with some of the boards that would be affected.
So the reason I didn't go in that direction, and it's a question, is if we went to town meeting in the fall with the elements that we could pass through a bylaw, which is the stuff that we already have purview over, is that really substantive enough to have a town meeting about? Do you know what I mean? Because nothing practically changes. We're just putting a bylaw in place. Or does it, aside from just making it a bylaw, does something change? Does some authority get reinforced?
Well, two different questions, right? So your comment, you made the comment that might not be enough. Do you mean without this, it might not be enough to even have a town meeting, or wouldn't be very attractive to get people interested in town meeting?
So the two draws so far have been the accessory apartment bylaw and the town administrator bylaw. And both are, based on this conversation, very iffy. So the draw for town meeting, I just don't know that you'd get the people there.
But is there still enough stuff to put on to have a town meeting?
Not without those two, unless
Okay.
something shows up in the next month.
Okay. So then the separate question is, do we need a bylaw? Like, setting that aside, what does a bylaw that just basically states our authority do? And
could
it's
we just
only
do a
if-
policy? I mean, if we want to do something, we could make a policy now and then make that a bylaw later.
Right,
I mean, if
I
we
mean,
needed
that's
some
right.
more-
I think you're right, Scott, that, there's not urgency, since we all have a year or two left at least on our terms, and we all seem to be very in sync in what we want. But, so I don't know that there's the urgency to do it in the fall. We may want to, I think my own feeling from what Ethan said is it's a cleaner presentation if we don't two-part it. We present, we say, look, this stuff we have, and we want you to vote that, and part B is, please, this stuff we'd like, and this is why we'd like it, and we need your vote to go to the MGL. I think if you separate them in time, you get like that town clerk thing, it's like weird, and it may not help us with the part B. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's weird to present
Yeah.
part one coming this spring, part two, the sequel, right? Like,
I also think there's maybe some work to do on just some of the, not even the wording, but the concepts in here. One of which, and I am going to get specific just because we've allocated quite a bit of time to go through this, but one of the things that I read in here on 3.3.3F was the town administrator shall be responsible for leading collective bargaining negotiations for contract covering town employees. I mean, I think that that's reasonable, but I would I think it's incumbent on the select board to be a part of that, because that's a inherently political decision as to how much or how little, because there are just lots of considerations, and we need to take in, feedback that we get from the community. And so I think, delegating that authority, I think we have to be very cautious or careful on how we prescribe this type of thing. That's one example. And, I thought there was another in there I thought it was about the signage or various things. No, but it was a thing that's a public facing, decisions. And again, I think that things that are, I don't know, public facing often, there's one thing, I very much support the idea of this TA bylaw, very much, because I do think we need a better umbrella for the town to have, consistency with our staffing, and really to have I wouldn't call him a CEO or her, but a person who can oversee that consistently and really make, decisions relative to efficiently and effectively running the town, the daytime government. But we need to, as the select board, need to set the policy and retain enough control to make sure we get that. But the goal here is also to pull us out of some of the day-to-day decision-making and things. I mean, we sign cemetery deeds and we do this thing, and sure, that's nice, but, it takes few minutes every time, and we could be talking about policy or things that, people
So
want.
that was 3.3.5 that you're talking about, and it is somewhat like what we're doing currently, but adding, because I think we've already delegated the signage at the Rotary, for instance, and the banners to the TA, and we've asked the TA to just notify us, when he does it.
I just think it's
Okay.
about tightening this up and
Okay.
making sure it's
I-
exactly,
so that's-
same with
I
like.
agree, but I think you're right, but let's make a list, but some of this came out of stuff that we've already done, is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Oh, I think it's a great start.
What my concern is I don't want to say we come to the decision this should be on Springtown meeting. I don't want this to be punted or put on the back burner. I want to make sure that this is an area of continued focus. And if the interim, we either continually refine a bylaw and/or we pass a policy that reinforces the things that we're asking Ryan to do, is there anything we could do in the interim? I don't want to lose sight of how important this is to the select board. And I don't know if we take action and put a deadline on ourselves to write a policy that is also the bylaw, is that something worth doing? Because I just want to keep this top of mind, and I want to reinforce to the town.
I like Barney, I think I think what we could accomplish, today or in the next few sessions is consensus that largely we want this, right? We're kind of pretty close to that point now. So now we get to the things that you're bringing up, details, and I like Barney's approach. I think if we are of a mind, I think then we should parcel out advocacy building and start with those elected boards that would be affected, because that's going to take a while. And that would be something that you don't just throw on them. Like, we would ask for their input, have working sessions.
Yeah.
I think that's the way we keep the momentum going, is to actually really focus on those things that we want to take to the MGL.
We should also articulate the common ground that we have, say the 80% of it that we agree on isn't controversial. We should get that in
Yeah,
place.
so there's some working session stuff that we
Yeah.
could do, I think, internally and, with other boards that will take, again, we're approaching budget season and this and that. It's going to take a little bit of time, and we should sort of plan that out. And especially if we believe that we can present this at Springtown meeting. Now you're on a calendar, right? Because you've got holidays in there, and then you've got the budgets, and you got all the other stuff. So you really have to make a proactive plan to, do that.
I guess I would really like a to-do list and a timeline, because I'm afraid that, because there's a lot of details, and there is a whole list of things, like what.
You'd rather have this done sooner,
that Travis-
have your homework done ahead of time than
Yes.
realize
yes.
you're behind
I don't want to
schedule.
get to Springtown meeting and we still haven't talked about all those little jobs.
got it right, no.
Ditzy jobs that may be political, may not be political, like signs and things like
They
that.
might need a working group, You maybe need a working group. And I agree with you. And I think we're saying the same thing, right? Get it
I
done.
don't think we need a working group. We should
We should
we've
treat it
got
like
a
the
good
budget.
draft.
We should have
Exactly.
the final draft by like end of year, and then you realize, oh, we thought it was final, but there's 3 other
You
things.
say we don't need a working group, but it's not about drafting. It's about these little things that have to be discussed. I mean, we can have them, and we certainly don't want to.
When you say
And-
working group, you mean working meetings here.
I'm thinking you really need to talk to staff as well as other boards to make sure all those little things are, picked up. I don't know the mechanics of it. I'm just saying, it's not something I think that should be a piece of our regular select board meetings.
Yeah,
It's
so
pretty
what,
granular.
yeah, so what we could do is, ask council to review what we've got down here and tell us the pieces that, for whatever reason, they would recommend we make some changes and also separate out the things that they believe would need to go to the legislature versus those that wouldn't. I could see, maybe there wouldn't be two people that want to do this, but I could see two people from the select board being responsible for some kind of a timeline where, for instance, we want to make sure there's a conversation with each of the boards that would be affected by this. Some general conversations. And then the second would be the actual drafting of something and setting a deadline for when we want that fairly well-developed draft to be ready for public discussion.
Yep. Well, as your faithful chair, I'll take that on if you want. I think that it is important, and I think it's permissible under open meeting law, but can I ask for
A second
person?
I'll do it.
Well,
No, sorry. As soon as you have two people working on something, you guys would have to have open meetings.
Nope, so if you create it, it's under your
Yeah, it doesn't
open meeting law.
matter.
So as soon as the chair creates it,
But I'm not sure we don't want that.
as soon as the chair creates it,
if
it
you
is.
create it, it's under open meeting law,
Yeah,
no matter how many people.
Right,
That's what I'm
but
saying.
is that a bad thing? I mean, that may be helpful in our advocacy.
It could be. I just think we can continue as a board. We could do we can discuss this. I think there's time.
OML now,
you know.
right?
What?
This is OML, right? I mean,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
OML is a bad thing. I'm just saying,
I'm not saying it's bad either. I'm just saying from how, you're right, process-wise, how are we best getting this
so
done?
the two factors, Travis, that would make me want it to not be in this meeting is, number one, it's going to be very time-consuming, and we don't have the time in this meeting. We got so much to do. Secondly, and all five of us don't need to weigh in. We seem like we're pretty. The second thing, though, is we want to invite, I think, you want to invite various people at different times and get their input. And that's just not, it's not as easy to do that in this kind of a meeting. It's better to have a separate meeting where you kind of do that, in my opinion.
Yeah, so why couldn't you, as the chair, for instance, for the input from other boards, designate that you and another person or two other people from the board would, we could even divvy it up, I don't know, but anyway,
Well, I think we have our
go and
liaison.
ask to meet with the various boards for a preliminary discussion about this whole thing, but particularly zero in on the stuff that would affect them.
Okay.
And that would be something we try to do in the next, maybe we say we want to get that done by end of October, beginning of November.
No, I think that's good. I just didn't know if you wanted to start with the draft we have, or if we as a select board should massage it a little bit, so then we have something to share, and that was really,
Yeah.
but if you want to just go with what we have.
I would get info back from council first.
Before you do any massaging.
Anything more,
Okay.
yeah, so we understand, separate out the pieces.
First thing is
into the two
separate the
buckets,
pieces in the
right?
buckets.
And then also whatever other language is here that they would change or eliminate and why, right? So get their feedback on what we've got here and answers to the questions we asked, and then start that process.
But I would also say that the members of this group should also think of some functions. So for instance, the one that's not on this list was the dog hearings. Functions that we currently do that we would like to offload onto somebody else. We had cemetery deeds, things like that. So I think we should be also collecting information from ourselves.
Is there a list, I mean, I know we asked Ethan, but is there a list somewhere of what select boards or this select board has as,
As functions?
Yeah.
There is, I believe
there must be a list
It's in
somewhere.
the bylaw. We have with the select.
I mean, things like dog hearings, I mean, does that show up in some kind
No,
of?
not in our town.
I mean,
It does in some other towns.
yeah, I was having an interesting conversation with a guy over the weekend. It was comparing the Navy and the Air Force answer. It's a little esoteric, but he said basically, the Navy says these are the things you cannot do, and everything else you can do. And the Air Force says these are all the things you can do, And if it's not in here, you can't do it. And the Air Force manuals are like 60 times bigger than the Navy manuals. So do we have that way? Like, these are the things we can't do and everything else we can do, or the other way? I don't have any idea.
So you have Mass General Law,
Yeah.
because you're a statutory town. So
Yeah.
it tells you what you.
All right, so there's a list
But
somewhere.
basically, the list is, if it's silent, you do it.
Okay, so it's the Navy way.
Yep.
Okay, what's the Army do, by the way? Same way?
You don't trust people that much.
All right, so I mean, so
not
back to,
enumerated as-
it's not enumerated.
So
It's the things that are proscribed are
Are
enumerated.
everything else, the power, according
So maybe we don't do what Kate said. I guess you have to do it anecdotally then. These are the things generally we do when we don't want, we want to delegate them.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
And I would like to have to delegate them only once and not have to relitigate them every
No,
time
no, I
another
agree with you.
example of it comes
I
up.
Well, and I think we need I would advocate for a top-down approach where we're, versus a bottom-up approach where we're interviewing every, I mean, I think we should, the final, whatever we present should probably be about of this length and detail versus a very detailed list of all these different things. I think at some point, detail becomes counterproductive. So I think we need to figure out what are the general responsibilities, and then as we need to add detail, we can do that as necessary, but I think we should start high level and go down.
I thought this was well done,
Yeah.
actually, and kind of captured some areas that were important.
And the only thing that I question about it is there stuff that isn't in here that should be in here?
Yep.
Like, is there stuff we're missing that we don't want to miss? And so
Yeah.
you need to scrub it for that and make sure we're not leaving something out that otherwise we would have put in there. And then what are the things in here that we really, as a select board, need to debate and discuss, like you were bringing up? And there's probably a list of 5 or 6 things that are currently under our purview that we want to debate. And then the stuff that's not currently under our purview, that's where we do the advocacy and work with the other groups.
Well, that's what I was just asking for, that
Yeah.
things that are in our purview
Yeah.
that we would like to delegate.
But certainly, like the Board of Health, anything to do with the Board of Health or Planning Board, that would not be within our purview.
That's not
and
within our
clear.
purview.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're going to keep going then. I think
Okay.
this is,
So, perhaps the chair could work with the vice chair and just do a timeline.
sounds
Yeah.
great.
Right, of what
Yeah.
we're trying to do when.
Yep.
And maybe
then
we
get
chunk it
back.
out, like tonight we're discussing the things under our purview that.
I'll come
Yeah.
back to you in the next
Yeah.
meeting with some kind of timeline.
Right.
All right. But I think this is really important, because if we're going to move this forward, you're right, we need a,
And I think the sooner we involve the other chairs of the other statutory committees, the better, to let them, but I would not do it before we have had this vetted by the council. And
Yeah.
And
We
to
should
have-
have a clear idea of
Right.
what we want.
Right, right.
yeah.
I agree.
What we're trying to accomplish. And I think it's important that it's not a power grab. What we're trying to accomplish is, I think, a smoothly working daytime government that works efficiently and cooperatively. And we would like to have some, and we don't feel that that can happen without some management, some management, period, full stop. And we feel that a good place to put that management is in the TA position. But we need to have their buy-in for that to assure that, that things run smoothly, because it's also because also we are the ones that need to ensure that all the tax dollars get used as efficiently and as possible. I think we are collecting enough taxes. I don't think we are dispersing and getting our money's worth in certain areas because we are not able to manage the staff.
okay. Thank you, Kate.
Can I mention one?
You sure
Couple
can.
process things, I'm
Yep.
sorry. So the Government Study Task Force,
Governance Task Force.
Governance Task Force Study
Yes.
Committee.
Yes.
Working Group Bylaw, whatever the name is. Sorry, they interviewed dozens and dozens of staff and board members, and if you read the narrative of that report, you can see years and years of where the conflict points are, and I think that's a good place to start. I do think this board needs to have a discussion about, so when we put up the town organizational chart, it was very clear in your minds, this position, select board, never give to TA, this position, give to TA. So you
mean
have
hiring
that
or-
in your mind, right?
Yeah.
Like you have your chiefs, the town clerk was in that bucket at one point, thoughts of finance director, et cetera. So clearly articulating that would help this process or working group or whatever you create. So we never want the town administrator in charge of the police chief, because the police chief is a direct select board hire. Like that clarity is important. One of the talking points you keep talking about, so the staff has become a proxy for board fights in many instances. So this is really about staff clarity, not board functions. So the staff should be doing the execution and policy work of all the boards, not fighting policy fights amongst each other because the boards haven't talked about what they want. And what you've talked about a little bit is the delegated tasks. So what tasks do you want to download would help.
Yeah, a clear list.
And if you can give those high level, like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
then the subcommittee or the working group doesn't have to figure out what everybody wants with those things, because those are kind of the key topics.
And the last thing is the personnel thing. I think still the town hall hours and things like that, whether offices are, even down to lunch schedules, to make sure that there's always somebody sitting somewhere, so that if we have a resident wandering in, that they can get some service, or
But I mean, is that, if we're delegating to the TA, do we need to get granular like that?
No, I'm saying this in general, that if there's a statutory board, they may not feel that they have to cover their office, that.
No, I know.
That's a personnel, it goes under personnel management again, I'm going back.
But I agree with,
Personnel management.
yeah.
And
We should
that-
agree with Scott, though. We should really try to be top-down, like as broad as we
And
can.
not redo the homework, as you were pointing out. A lot of
Right.
work's been done on this. And I would say, based on what the attorney said, it sounds like we may already have the purview of operations. We should get clarity on that and move forward with
Okay.
whatever.
Yeah, well, that's, okay.
We don't need the bylaw. We
Because
can.
that's one of the things that keeps
We don't need no
on
stinking bylaw.
rearing its ugly head. That's why I want to make sure that it's clear, and that it's clear that it's the TA that makes those decisions.
We can confirm
So
that
that-
piece with the attorney. If we currently have that ability, then we should clarify that and implement whatever we need to
I
implement.
can answer that for you. You do not.
Okay. So that would require a special legislation.
This town hall operates in 4 different ways.
Okay, so that needs.
Depending
We
on
don't
the-
currently, but by law, we don't have that ability. Okay, because.
Well, so as a manager, the only authority I have to make someone sit in their seat is the ability to hire, fire, and evaluate. So if they're not in their seat, then I have to go to the person who has that authority and say, do you want to do something about this? And sometimes the answer is no.
Fair enough.
I can't make someone sit in their seat if the person who's actually in charge of them doesn't care.
So
And vice versa, I can't make them do professional development. And
we could set certain operation parameters, but you can't enforce those operation parameters.
we can say town hall's open from 9 to 5, but if a board or committee wants their employee to work in a different way,
Right.
then that office is closed from
Fair enough.
3 to 5. And then we have my favorite complaint from residents, which is, town hall's open, why isn't someone here? And I go, I don't know.
Not great.
Go see the chairman of the export, right?
It brings why we're pushing.
Yeah.
I mean, this is,
Right.
it's
Very-
needed, but it's just the process that we're going to do.
I know
So-
it feels granular, but I just want to remind people why we are doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and going back, and I don't want to belabor it, but going back to all my years on the finance committee, this was always a very top-of-mind issue. Previous town administrator and, approached the role differently, and trying to get answers and staffing, and, it's been an ongoing struggle as they worked on the budget. And the solution is to do something like this and to have clear authority. Otherwise, you're just spinning your wheels, and it's necessary.
Okay. Well, we will move on, and we'll have a timeline
Okay.
next meeting. And we'll keep going. We're going to move on to the 25 Select Board goals. I thought it would be helpful to kind of review those, but I also know that there are some specific things that are going on that are important, and we should just kind of get an update on those. So I can actually ask the TA if you wanted to talk about those various components and go over them. That would be great.
Sure, so here is the next.
Look at that.
This is the next 2 years. I'm trying to keep it simple. The last year plus the next year.
Thank you for not picking red as the color for 2025, by the way. Gives me optimism.
No, it's green.
Yeah,
Because
green is
we're
good.
past the-
So here we are in September. There's
Yeah.
4 months left plus the next 12. So I'll start with the police station renovation. So the police station renovation, we will likely have an OPM selected by the middle of September at the latest. Which means that that OPM has to quickly get up to speed with the police station building renovation committee, work with the designer, and then get the bid set out to bid, assuming that we have the final approval from the Board of Health. So more likely than not, we're bidding in early October with a late October, early November return, and then a selected construction company for November, December. The ability to do a little bit of work, this is all like, I'm thinking positively. So with a little bit of work in December and January, we will start the bulk of construction in 2025, as soon as construction season begins. And it likely will take a year, given the working around operations, et cetera. That's my guess. So that's the building. That one's already done. The library has a very similar time frame, assuming they get their funding done. So if they don't get their funding done, then the design has to be rebooted or cut down. So both of those have building committees about to hire OPMs, which should start the construction process, and they both have very similar timelines. So those are good, yeah.
Can I ask, when you say the library get their funding, when is the kind of end of that process? When do they have to get their funding by?
There is no deadline, so it's,
Okay.
once we hire the OPM, and Bill's here too, he's on the building committee. Once they hire the OPM, they'll work with the designer and get something out to bid. But you can either bid it without the funding and hope to get the funding to match when the bid comes in and the construction season starts, or you're gonna have to redo the plan.
Right, you can't bid it without the money. I mean, you can't accept the bid without the money, right?
You can't sign the contract without the money. You can bid it saying, we are hoping to get the money, do you still want to bid?
So back to Travis's question, what, in that timeline, what's that drop dead time that they have to have the money?
So that committee and the library trustees will either have to decide one way or the other. So to be more definitive, if they want to bid without the money, then
Well, let's say they do without the money, but when do
is
they
it
absolutely,
yeah.
when they put
When
pen
do
to
they have to
paper,
have the money in
have to have the
hand?
money in the bank?
when you've selected a design.
I know, in your timeline, when is that?
Oh, I don't know.
You just gave a timeline. You said the library's the same. So is it like Christmas time? I just, you said in the police case, we'll pick a construction company November, December. I assume that means signing a contract with a construction company.
So let's say library would be the same with a caveat of there might be another decision in there.
Right, but in this timeline, I think where we're going is they really need to complete their fundraising by the end of the calendar year if they're going to be on this cycle.
Can
Right, yes.
I just add, I see that there's a member of the, you're welcome to speak, Bill, if you want.
No, Bill.
Introduce yourself.
I'm Bill Russo, Millfront Road. Ryan's kind of right, and it depends, because there's ways of doing this, which the OPM will work on and will decide on. As the design is progressing, there's going to be estimates being done.
There's going to be what?
Estimates being done.
Okay.
Because right now, we have a certain amount of money. So right now, the design is going to be for that certain amount of money as it progresses. So if the total funding gets raised, if you will, then they're gonna do everything that the trustees and library people want done. But if it doesn't, there's gonna be de-scoping along the way.
Right.
In that de-scoping, so that at least some of the project will get done.
Right,
That's
so
my
you're saying there's
understanding.
no scenario where there's not enough money to really do the
Because
project.
there's already.
They've already raised enough money to do
It is,
something.
yeah.
Exactly, so there's gonna be compromises, because nobody gets everything they want, right?
Right.
But that's the scenario I see that's happening with this, and so it's, I think it's gonna be, something's gonna be done at the library, it's just how much of what we want done, or what the trustees want.
And do you know
done.
how much more they need to raise on the private side?
Not sure, I don't know, Brian,
Okay.
I'm not aware of that.
Real rough, 400,000 to 500,000 to meet the 2023 estimate, which could be now behind.
Yes, because there's been inflation and all,
Yep.
which is happening.
Okay.
Well,
Construction.
there were some construction costs that went down, but then there was inflation that went up, so, yeah.
Thanks.
So that will, the reason why I'm throwing this in your select board goals as well, because it's mostly the trustees and their funding. But there will be a decision on elevators and expansions and other MFC projects that are tied to that renovation that you'll have to make. Not this second, but
Yeah.
it'll be cheaper to bid it out as alternates, and then you'll have to fund in a certain cycle.
So are you saying that, let me say it a different way. If there was no library renovation project and they needed an elevator, they would be looking to the town to do it, right?
Yeah.
The fact that they're doing a reno, the add-on or whatever of an elevator is still ours. Like they're looking to carve that out of what they raise and back to town.
More precisely, it's the HVAC, the 42 units, little individual units that they have all over them.
And the
And
elevator.
the elevator.
And the elevator.
And the elevator, oh, okay.
The
And
elevator.
the
Have we
elevator as well.
budgeted for that in
Okay.
25?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we'll talk about that later.
Well, in theory, you have, yeah.
Okay. All right.
All right, so fire, moving on to fire. So fire bids for the OPM are due September 30th. So the end of what I'm now considering this month, but we still have a couple days. So you will be selecting your OPM in October. Let's say by the end of October, you'll have your OPM. The OPM is supposed to help you, walk you through pre-design, and then help you select a designer that will convince you of the scope of the project that's necessary to renovate the fire station and what those costs will likely be. If you remember, we've had those discussions before. So let's say that's November, December, to get that done, knowing right now that you only have one meeting in December, so being optimistic there. So if you were to go to Springtown meeting with a design and build like you did with the police station, the design would have to be completed in 60 to 90 days with permitting. So I'm being recommendatory to you and saying that it's not likely.
To be ready for
For Springtown.
Springtown
Yeah,
meeting.
That's too fast.
Then you,
Yeah.
with the clarity you like on the cost and
Yeah.
potential permitting, et cetera. So I'm telling you that because if you want to meet the next deadline, this has to become a priority for your goals. The next deadline either being the fall or the next Springtown meeting.
And then we usually don't do financial things in the fall. So we really might be looking at spring of '26.
Right, because it's hard, the reason we don't is because how do you raise the money in the fall?
Budget,
You already
right.
have a budget, so it's a year from, it's a year and a half away.
But he's saying that we got to keep our foot on the gas here if we want.
Right, but you said that if we wanted it for fall town meeting, Springtown meeting, you'd have to have a 60-day window. I'm assuming if you're a year out, you got a 360-day window, so it should be enough
Should be
time.
doing, yeah.
Unless we decide to do it in the fall, because it's a bonding,
How do you do that? Explain me how you do that.
well, it's not a budgetary item, it's just, I mean, it has to do with money, but it's not in the operating budget.
That's
This-
nuance. It's not, I don't know. I defer to Scott. He's finance committee.
I'm on
background.
record about financial items and fall town meetings. I don't know, we'll have to discuss.
I think that would be
Back to
something that we
police, though,
discuss at the time.
if we start construction as early as practical in 2025, based on what you know of this project, when is occupancy by the end of the year? When is there a new police station?
That
Otherwise, we
would
don't get
be,
it until
that would be optimistic.
So
Probably a year from when you start,
a year from when you start, right.
because they have to work around operations.
As long as we have a rain, plenty of.
Okay, so it could be like early, the spring of '26.
Because they're not stopping occupancy, they're staying in the building.
They
So-
being police or fire?
Yes.
Right, but it's important, I mean, it's relevant because now it sounds like we might be talking about the fire station budgeting in spring meeting of '26, which is around the time we're done with police and take a breath and
Yeah.
keep
Yeah.
going.
Unless we have it in '25 and we just have more of a,
Maybe we don't have the specificity we.
We don't have the specificity.
Ideal specificity we desire, but again, you can't go over what's approved at town meeting.
Yeah,
and-
that's, yeah. Okay,
yeah,
all right, I
mean-
got it.
okay.
All right, so now we get into your favorite type of planning, which is nebulous planning. So
Hey,
It's not our favorite, it's just what we're good at.
are you talking? Are you saying that we order soft serve ice cream? Is that what you're saying?
Yogurt. It's yogurt.
This is the, right, this is the budgetary
Always
equivalent.
after the soft serve.
This is the- It's the budgetary equivalent of soft serve ice cream.
So two projects you have slightly moving, and two projects aren't moving at all. So I'm going to start with the Cranberry Bog House and
Yeah.
the DPW renovation. So the Cranberry Bog House right now is being investigated for the ability to use CPC funds in order to pay for some type of project, or to kickstart some type of project, or to do something with affordable housing in the Cranberry Bog House.
Yeah.
The reason that's been identified as a goal is because it's possible, maybe, and because it has a funding source like CPC if you go down that route. So if you hit the gates by the fall, you would then be starting the design investigation in the spring of '25.
Meaning,
Wait.
it's concluded that we can access CPC funds to do that.
And that
And that
you're
we
okay
have a-
with the goal of the building, which is
Yeah.
this type
And
of.
that vote would happen in fall town meeting?
So then you're looking at either fall or '26 spring in order to.
No, but I mean, if the gate says it does qualify, but we still have to go to town meeting to say this is a approved use of CPC? The gate just says it's eligible.
So if it's eligible, then you'll get some type of conceptual design that would likely get a CPC request in the spring.
Spring of '25.
And then there would be a design and build at some point with maybe like a habitat funding or some other funding, but that's likely spring of '26.
Yeah.
Right.
Before town meeting considered an actual,
Yes. If you keep this on your agenda,
Yeah.
it doesn't fall off.
yeah.
But I guess I'm still want clarity. So the now time is it even possible, right? Then they say, yes, it's possible. Then in the spring town meeting of 2025, there's one of those normal CPC requests for some design money, right?
That
And
would-
then that process starts, and then in the following year, you have a definitive, okay.
If you keep your eye on that prize.
Yep.
All right, so the DPW, the MFC is right now working with a designer or an architect in order to give you some idea of what a renovation would cost, what a new build would cost, and why you would do one or the other. So that one is likely 2027 if we're being realistic. 'Cause
This is the DPW, right?
That you,
They'd even be able to think about doing something like that. So
And
it's
what-
27, 28.
Just out of curiosity, the longer lead time for that is just due to the complexity or?
Yeah, so the first time you're going to be exposed to it, then it's going to be, do you want to design it and then do it? Right, so
I
And
think
to
it's
initi-
also in priorities of, we had started with police, fire, it just didn't
Right.
need,
So it's-
basically.
It's kind of the third of the three, police, fire, and then
the
DPW.
fourth of the four,
Well,
Bog
yeah,
House.
there
Bog
are
House is
there are
coming.
others, but.
And then there's
uh,
others behind, the fourth of.
But as far as
6.
municipal facilities, it
Right.
needs, the MFC has been reviewing it, has had architectural plans that we've reviewed or ideas with the architect, and, we're working towards, a
Working toward bringing a recommendation to the
Right.
select board?
yes.
But why
And
the
what's that
extra
time?
year, though? I guess that's the part that Scott's asking.
I think that was just from a budgetary timing standpoint as to the amounts of logically how things are going to fit in.
Right.
our interpretation of your prioritization of this.
Right, okay, so in other words, it's not, if we had suddenly woke up and said, this is our number one priority, it wouldn't take that extra year. It would be
We
a
could
26
probably
event.
turn that around very quickly. It's a
Right.
pretty
It's not,
simple.
right, it's not that part, it's not the complexity, it's the
No.
urgency.
In financial order.
There's also that you haven't seen the
Yeah.
bill and the conceptual design, so. Cranberry Bog House, you can kind of picture it, the DPW, you haven't
Less than
seen
you
it yet.
thought.
Right, so when in that process does that rough idea, I presume then this working committee at the MFC or the architect is, like, option A is, here's a new design, and option B, here's a reno, and here's the rough order magnitude of those costs?
Yeah, that's coming in
that
the
would
next
be-
couple of months.
Okay, so that'll be soon. That's fall '24, that we would have
See
a
it.
sense of that. Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, so then there's two that have no plans or nothing moving right now. So that's the Highland Building and the community center. So the community center, there's a lot of goals and scoping being done, but no studies or definitive plans, nothing in front of the select board. In the Highland Building, you know that I don't have to rehash the Highland Building. So why does this matter for your goals? The DPW has a significant amount of capital investment in the next 5 years, so you'll want to bring this forward. Cranberry Bog House has been identified in your goals as coming up with some type of plan, and then you have to fit in the Highland Building and the community center in any of these discussions
Yeah.
if you want to talk about financial impact and other things. So the point of this is just to kind of get you to wrap your mind around how to prioritize these things. As you've all said, and David said tonight, you only have so much time at these meetings, and we need to know what to focus on as staff. And I'm sure your chair would appreciate it too.
Yeah, well, we did ask the school committee to focus on the Highland Building, and I hope that they are focusing on it, and that they'll come back to us in a couple of months to, to let us know what they're thinking. So maybe you could, Goose,
And I'll be talking with the school
oh,
committee
you,
about that,
okay, and Jim O'Shea.
Yep. But I mean, for us, at least in the immediate term, police, fire,
Right.
the library, I don't know
We just
how
take
much
those. Yeah, we take.
time in our meetings we spend on that. It's part of the larger,
I just want you to know about it.
yeah,
Also,
absolutely.
the CPC funding that was approved is tied to them meeting
The
full
goal.
goal too.
I was just thinking about that,
That could
yeah.
come back to you if they don't.
Yeah,
I would think the DPW renovation will become an increasing part of our agenda as the year
Yeah.
progresses.
and it'll be way more expensive than you're expecting, because even though you think it's, going to be a simple building, or it'll be just a steel building, or.
Right, I mean,
watching-
well, and then how do these 6 building projects fit with other things that require
Yeah,
capital,
yeah,
which are
yeah.
plenty, so.
I've been watching Rockport's new DPW, and they're now at 17 million. So, 6 years ago, it was supposed to be 2 million.
Sounds like a Massachusetts project.
So how to flush these ideas out? So you have to meet, you don't have to do anything, but you
Yeah.
should meet with the MFC about the DPW when they're ready. Definitely needs to be a conversation with the Council on Aging and about their designs on a community center, the school committee, as you mentioned already. And then you're really going to have to push the fire up your agenda if you want to, because if we don't, then we miss markers, right? So for every month we miss,
It's not a good thing.
it's not a good thing.
And really, fires should be ahead of
Well, it is.
DPW. I know, but I did,
Once you get your OPM sitting here,
yeah.
it's going to go pretty
Right.
quick.
And that process is being done by, we're doing the hiring for the fire
Yes.
OPM, right? So
Yes.
that needs to be on our agenda.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
this is one of the reasons for having this conversation. So that's probably going to be 2 meetings. So you're going to have to vet each proposal, and then you're probably going to want to identify an interview, like most of the committees have, which means you're eating up 2 to 4 hours of your meetings in that month in order to keep that process moving.
I might suggest we might have to have an extra meeting.
Yeah.
Either maybe
Maybe one
even a
that's
morning
just-
one, or when we're fresh.
Or just one, yeah, specifically around that OPM.
Yes.
Hire.
When do we know if there's a fall town meeting?
Maybe
Well, let me see, we've
We may-
opened,
yeah.
we've opened the warrant
'Cause
already,
that could
right?
free up some time in October.
Well, it might, yes, absolutely. I would say that pretty soon you'll know about the ADUs. That's what I was at today, was that how the new mass housing law affects the accessory dwelling units, and how it impacts our what's it called?
Housing bylaw?
No, we have a bylaw, but we don't call it, we call it accessory, we don't call it accessory dwelling units, we call it, shoot. Anyway,
It won't mean anything to us anyway.
well, the thing is that, yeah, we may have, there's a bylaw, we already have a bylaw that does something similar to this new law, and planning board has to decide whether they want to wait until more regulations come out to change our bylaw, or whether they'll just change, because they wanted to refresh it. Anyway, we'll know more in a couple of weeks.
Well, you only have one shot at the king.
Yeah,
You don't want it.
well, yeah, in terms of the state law, the king's already been.
But I guess also, if that's the only thing on the agenda, is it sufficient, or should it roll to? Because it's a lot of work to prepare for town meeting.
And expense.
Even if there's just
Yes.
one item.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
And
on
there's-
the,
nobody likes multi-day spring town meetings, but there's something to be said for packing all that stuff in, like the way the MTL does it, and everybody's like, yeah, okay, let's get, sure, move on, right?
I wanted to talk about that with your goals too, as part of this strategic session here. So right now, it's lining up, assuming that this goes the way it sounded tonight. There'll be a TA bylaw, an ADU bylaw, MBTA communities, plus the budget. It sounds maybe not a
spring.
fire station. So the spring is, I mean, it's 2
It'd
nights.
be a big,
It's 2
Yeah.
big
nights.
one, but
But it better 2 nights in one meeting than 2 nights in 2 meetings, right? I think, I mean, even though we may regret that in May, but it is a lot of time, just wasted sort of non-productive time to create a meeting if there's like one agenda.
I agree. I
Yeah,
tend to
I
agree.
do too.
when did we close our warrant? This-
24th of September.
The 24th of September. Well, I don't think we can close it early in case something comes out at us, but we could, by the 24th, we should know whether we're having a fall town meeting or not.
All right, and now the budget. So budget priorities. Before, I'm not sure if you're going to go through the goals or not, but I'm trying to be cognizant of
No,
time.
keep going.
So for budgeting priorities, there will be a discussion with the Finance Committee, and you will get a financial forecast and capital planning review. So we're going through those processes now, so that'll help shape your priorities. But I would like to call attention to the things we just talked about, so all the building projects and other things, in addition to the regular capital, which David referenced, which is includes, and you should know this now, $1 million elevator project for the 3 towns. So what was a $200,000 item and an ARPA of 140 is now the cost of 1 elevator. So there's 3 elevators in town that need to be fixed: town hall, an elevator in the school, and the library. So the MFC is going to use their funds to design it and get it ready to go and bid, maybe even bid it, and then the project will be ready to go. So that should save money, but it's very
But
expensive.
it's $1 million, the 3.
But total, yeah, you think, okay.
And when we're doing our budgeting, when will we discuss, sometimes we've put some sort of cap, like, what we thought the tax cap is or should be. Do we do that at the beginning or at the end of the process?
It's funny you mention that, because that is kind of what we need to kind of codify is
Yeah.
the process, because we've been working at trying to develop a new budgeting process. And, we can come up with that, or, I don't know if there are.
Right, in other words, the question of what is that percent, or at least what's the rough or close to percent that we think we want to try to meet in terms of its
Well-
tax increase.
Just, I'll go ahead and jump right in. I think we have to think about more than what we have done in the past, because we have these things, and I think it would be better if we ramped up rather than suddenly have, 12%
Jump in 1
big
year.
jump in 1 year. So whether we, I don't want to say whether we need it or not, because we do need it. I think it would be, I guess I would like to see the plan and then talk about how to ramp it up rather than make some sort of a cap now and have everybody try to,
And it's
Put it on.
futile. I mean,
Yeah.
I've been on the other side enough times where it's like, here's a percent, and it's like,
Yeah.
then you start the budgeting process. I think what you're getting at, and what I'd like to see is, like, not here's the goal for this year. It's like, it's the plan, right? Like, let's look at the 5-year plan or the 10-year plan. Let's understand, okay, this year, and have the finance committee come back with, this year, we think we need a larger increase, but we're going to offset it in 2 years, because, it's part of a larger picture.
Yeah.
And so I'm not a big fan of, here's a cap for a given year, because it always falls by the wayside once you get into the actual budget. It's more understanding that host of projects, and what does the 5-year look like? What's coming down the pipeline? Does that mean we have to give up something this year because next year we know this is coming down? I think that's what's important.
I guess I'm also wondering if let's say every 10 years or so, we shouldn't do zero-based budgeting to see where, because very often people just roll their budgets over. They say, okay, we're going to do, our 2%. And I understand the
Yeah.
salaries, we kind of go that way. But the thing is, are there functions that are being done that no longer need to be done?
Well, and that ties back into the town administrator role,
Well,
right?
yeah.
But yeah, sure, but, I've been through the zero-based budgeting things too, and they're really just kind of hand-waving, honestly, by the time we get done. So I think the bigger issue, and I
Well-
agree with the way Ryan is tackling it, the operating budget, we've been pretty good about keeping a lid on operating budgets, even in the face of unfunded mandates that come down and, more complex needs and all this and that. So to my mind, again, it's kind of simplifying it, if I'm confident that the operating budget can be held at a 2.5–3% slope, like, okay, there's a lot to do, but, each year is a different story, and there's always new needs. I mean, there's maybe a few things you can carve back, but then, sustainability raises its hand and you're buying, a hydrogen bus, right, or something. So, no, you laugh, but that's what's going to happen, right? So, but now you get to these projects, these big deal projects and all these other CapEx. That's where I think where Ryan is justifiably focusing in a long-range plan. So just, my advice is just, he'll manage the budget, we'll manage the budget of operating side, but putting together the capital pieces and modeling the debt service that flows from that is really the trick.
And in the challenge was always in the past where you just get the same budget, and the challenge in previous years was there was no town administrator doing the budget
That's right.
vetting process to begin with, so you
Right.
just didn't know
Right.
if
Now
this
we
was
know.
legitimate or not. My hope is that just by virtue of the way Ryan is approaching the role and what we're talking about with a bylaw change, is that he's doing the vetting.
Yeah.
Maybe he's doing zero-based budgeting for a given department, or maybe he.
We'd like to.
Well, but there's a day-to-day vetting
Yeah.
that's not from within the department, and it's not just each department advocating for themselves.
That's what I think that's partly.
It's rolling up to the town administrator, which,
So we agree. I mean, that's,
yeah.
so the challenge is modeling the bigger capital chunks.
And knowing ahead of
doing
time.
What ifs on that.
And knowing ahead of time if, for whatever reason, there's going to be a hit one way or the other in the operating budget in a given year, just so it's not a
Just like the
surprise.
assessment ratio, you overlay things.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Did we answer your
What would be
question, Travis?
helpful from us in this?
So the biggest, the focus of the select board for the next couple of years, if it's not
Capital.
clear from this presentation, is deciding the big capital. And what and where to invest, because there's a lot of truth to what's been said tonight. There's no way to control that cost except to decide what you are not going to do. It will not fit into the operating budget as it exists now. With services the way it is, you'd have to slash, which could be an answer. But these are all things that are being discussed, and individually, they are very well supported. I think you need to talk about how they fit into the bigger picture.
We're going to have to use debt for these big capital projects. I mean,
Yeah.
and it makes sense to use debt. I mean,
Right. But it's just how much do we want to take on?
well, you need a debt schedule, and you need all that
Yeah.
timing of it, and how's that interacting with the school debt coming down and all that stuff? I mean, it's,
I mean, we haven't asked for an override in a long time because we've been fiscally prudent and we've had a gap. But as Ryan points out, I think I forget when, but this modeling will show there'll be it's one thing to say, well, we need a 5% tax increase, but statutorily we have the cap, right? We can.
we
do
have a
that.
lot of excess levy. I don't think we.
Yeah,
do.
no, we
I
have
don't
the
know.
ex-
Do we?
We have
do
like
still?
over
Okay.
$3 million, I think.
Okay, so we still.
We wouldn't do that in a given year.
Yeah.
Okay, good. That's good to hear.
I mean, we'd fund it with
I thought
debt.
you
If
were
it was a project
showing me
that
a graph
big,
at one point that we were going to bump up against that.
we can't take on $100 million
No.
in capital
That I
projects.
spend, but you've-
But if we raise the
you
tax
said
rate
that.
now and have a
We have the same
stabilization
levy
fund,
capacity we had the
then we
last
can
couple
take
years.
on
Well,
more debt.
that's the whole picture, though. It's
Yes.
this whole complicated.
I think that part of the picture would be an analysis of how much a stabilization fund, can then increase the amount of debt that we could tolerate, because it would kind of cut off the
As long as we
peak.
keep our,
so-
stabilization.
We want to smooth it out, right?
We want to smooth it out.
Right.
So that's why I guess I this year might be advocating for a slightly higher tax rate to let it float up a little to fund the stabilization so that when some of these big things hit, it's not as
Yeah.
a big a deal.
Or it may not, it may just be that by virtue of the timing, the debt doesn't hit for another 3 years. It's
Yeah.
hard to say, like next year, it might not be next year, it might be the year after where you're really taking.
Well, I like the sequence that Ryan laid. I mean, I'm not crazy about saying wait till 2027 for a DPW shed or something, but in theory, in purely looking at it as a financial planning exercise, the sequencing of police, library, sort of hopefully a minimal load
Yeah,
on
makes
us,
sense, yeah.
fire, then tackle, Cranberry Bog, then tackle DPW. In that sequence, again, politics aside, you sequence a set of those capital projects for the next, 8, 9 years. And then you have to lay in the roads and the other things, the elevators, all, which we're doing a better job now of forecasting. I think the picture starts, and there's always extraordinary items, but the picture gets clearer of what that piece is going to look like, and then you get back to that mechanic that you're talking about. When is the appropriate time to
Yeah.
raise a little more money? And by the way, as you all know, the best time to take on debt is when you don't need debt.
That's what exactly, not putting politics aside, I think I would like to bring politics into it, because I think we need to start lobbying rather aggressively and maybe asking other towns to help us or to ally with us to the state to have an organization or a funding mechanism that would be similar to the school building funding mechanism
For
for
just town
municipal
facilities.
We are not the only town that are in bad shape with facilities.
We are in much better shape than a lot of towns
We-
financially.
Okay, but so the thing is, I think we need to start working also at the state level to get them to listen to that and to start funding some of that.
advocacy building at all? You're in touch with small towns,
So that is the number one priority for small town administrators, or one of the number one priorities, because of this reason. So most towns are able to handle their operating and their basic capital. It's these big projects that keep
Right.
either crushing that or getting delayed.
So are they
Yes.
trying to build advocacy now?
Yes, it's finding a funding source. So things have been discussed, like the millionaire's tax and others,
Yeah, so
but they keep
rich.
getting eaten up by
Other
other
things.
priorities.
Yeah.
It's familiar, right? So
But we could invite our rep and
Yeah, well, we should do.
have a discussion with him so that he understands.
So the two things I talk about all the time, so surprise when we do their 5-year road plan to meet
Yeah,
what you
but
said
there's-
you want for basic, it's gonna require more capital. So more Chapter
Yes.
90 would allow you to use your money that you would have used on roads to fund building debt. Right, so they gotta, and I say they don't have to do anything, but there should be a give somewhere to help small towns tackle these problems.
Yeah.
Big towns tend to have okay buildings, really high pressure operating, small towns kind of the opposite.
So you mentioned something at one point, maybe cued by the Westford Road thing. We talk about the pavement plan, we've seen the studies in that maybe it's somewhere between 500,000 and $1 million a year could be absorbed in that. But then you mentioned culverts, like there's this lurking, that problem we just had is repeated in other areas. Do you have a sense of that?
We know of at least two,
And they're $1 million, how much are they, 500 each or? $1 million?
500 to $1 million apiece.
Okay. So that's kind of in line with the
Chunk
elevator.
change.
Oh, yeah, I mean, it is compared to
Capital plan.
buildings, but
Yeah.
it's a lot of money,
We
right?
just use gold bars to fill in.
I wish.
That'd be cheaper.
Yeah.
So, Ryan, do you have what you need from us relative to that? I mean, I think we're kind of maybe collectively asking for some budgeting
A scenario.
scenario. Is that,
Well, and if I were to articulate it, I'd say we want to kind of business, like maintain service operating budget, and we want to plan of how we're going to fund, or the formation of a plan, how we're going to fund the priorities we're talking about tonight in terms of the large capital projects. To me, the FinCom is what they should really be focused on.
The number one thing the select board can do to help in all this is to make some prioritization decisions
Right.
On the capital spending,
about the capital spending,
yeah.
which is probably the hardest thing to do. So you're being asked to lead, but it's how much to spend on roads, how much to spend on operating, and then how do these big projects fit into that picture? We
Yeah.
can help you with the rest. And then I definitely wanted you to see, and your chair wanted you to see the timelines on these things, so that when you do decide to take a discussion and push it, I just want you to know the impact on that. So definitely don't want to rush any decisions, but
Yeah.
we need to spend enough time to make some. Which I think has been happening. It's not happening.
Well,
but-
you're going to start having some, I noticed you scheduled some already, some capital hearings and stuff, right? Or
Yes.
meetings, I don't know if they're hearings, but.
Yeah, so we want to get the capital plan done first.
Yeah,
Because it really impacts the rest of the budget.
And those meetings will involve multi-year lookouts, right?
So in order to do that capital plan, do you need the select board to say, this is our list, this is our priority list, police, fire, bog house, DPW? I mean, is that what you're looking for?
At some point you'll have to, or some
Yeah.
version of this board will have to, but
Yeah.
it needs to,
Yeah, okay.
So the first thing you asked me when I started here was, what can we afford? Right, and this is the pushback on that is, you can
Tell me
definitely
what you
afford
want.
something.
Yeah.
It's what do you want,
Right.
what do you want to afford?
Yeah,
Let me say that, typically, this is not unusual, right? We get in the rush of preparing the 2026 budget, so we're very, one-year focused, including often the capital items that are on that list.
Right.
We, better over the last, 5 years or so, getting much better at putting a 10-year plan. And again, buildings aside, dump trucks and, other things. We're getting a lot better at sort of populating a multi-year spreadsheet of those things. And I think part of it, in my opinion, and I think the meetings that we're going to have with each department on that granular stuff, I think presenting that and saying, okay, not just this year, but how does it look for these 5 years? Like, do you agree, like, that this is where those things should be? And then you can lay in these bigger things, and it'll be, I think, better. It'll get a better, and then, of course, then we should do some debt service modeling types assumptions
Yeah.
to really say, all right, here's some data on what the impact of those priorities, and we should be able to do a little, switching around. I mean,
Yeah.
Ryan is extremely facile with spreadsheet, scenario building, which is, really helpful, I think.
great.
Did we finish the TA report?
Well, no, I just wanted to quickly, while we're,
ARPA.
yeah, we're going to go to
Oh, ARPA,
ARPA
sorry,
next,
yeah.
but
Kate.
Is there anything else?
Goals in our packet?
Yeah, well, no, the goals, I just had wanted to make sure we kind of keep our eye
Yeah,
on what we had
yeah.
originally targeted, and we can do that in literally, I think, a minute or
Anything
two.
that stands out?
Well, we've studied the fire station, I think, is on, at least we have a
track.
target. The Highland Building is, we're waiting on on the school committee. The Bog House, we've talked about, the
Underway,
process there. And then prioritizing CPA funds, we're gonna,
We're working on. Yeah.
Fiscal sustainability, we promote and implement resource sharing that continues. Ensure the establishment performance review system used by all departments. Some of that is going to have to come through the TA bylaw, if that
Yeah,
is going to
that's-
really be moved forward. Review the revolving funds and establish appropriate policies. And then connectivity and access, touring town-owned buildings. We've done our first one, but we are going to, I think that's really helpful, frankly. Support town meeting
Yes.
study committee. I don't know, David, if there's anything new to report on.
No, I mean, we've been sort of quiet this summer. We're meeting on Thursday, and we're continuing to refine the survey. Nancy and Danielle are really working statistically to get some more feedback. We're now in a mode of reaching out to comparable towns to see, but, everybody's got like the same problems, basically, is what
Yeah.
we're learning, right?
Yeah.
And, so I don't know. I was hoping, well, we were considering that we would be able to try some things at Fall Town Meeting as a test bed for really making some changes for Springtown Meeting. But maybe it's just that we do that in spring. So,
Yeah, you might have to.
yeah.
All right, and then the other part of the connectivity and access is review and take to town meeting the town administrator bylaw to establish clear authority and responsibilities of the town administrator, and we're moving in that process, and we're that far. Environmental stewardship, environmental sustainability committee to develop a metric to evaluate the cost and benefits of economic and climate impact costs. I mean, they've worked on that relative to the climate leader, which, by the way, was one of support and finalized time climate leader application implementation. So that's been voted on. Study Carlisle's underground water supply and obtain recommendations for balancing protection of Carlisle's water supply.
That's happening.
That's
Really done
happening,
that.
yeah.
We had a working session. Who was it? Was it me and anybody else?
wasn't there.
No, it's just you, from
So we
here.
had I could report on that. So we had a pre-working session. Should have brought those. Well, maybe I have them. We had a pre-working session. I can actually tell you about that with Addie, Grady, Julie, and Tony, and myself, kind of outlining what we could and couldn't expect from a study, and then there was universal support, including Tony and Board of Health, for getting the rest of the records digitized so that we can have a full set of those things and, maybe use some funding to accept. They believe that town council told them that the revolving account could be used for that. So they have the money to do it. We just have to get them to do it. So then we had a very good session with.
Excuse me, I do want to point out, there was money, they had money
Well,
from,
Board of Health, Planning Board did.
Planning Board did,
I
okay.
think, it's really the Board of Health records that we're trying to get.
Okay.
The other ones, I think, are being digitized. I could be wrong about
Is
that.
that
but
right, Brian?
Funding sources, they could,
Board of Health
Others-
that lags,
It's the
right?
Board of Health that hasn't digitized their records yet.
you could change
There's a couple departments.
Planning Board is.
Planning board's done, Conscom.
Yeah, Conscom is another.
Conscom is the other one.
They're the other one dragging their heels. But, I mean, we're trying to remove impediments, right? So there's money there to do it. There seems to be collective will to do it.
Okay.
We met with Horsley Witten Group, and I was pretty impressed with them. They have a consultant, a guy named Adam Karowski, who they've been working with. And also Christine Johnson is on the Housing Trust.
Yes, and she's a civil engineer, so she.
So I think there was a
she's
general consent, I mean, I don't want to spend too much time on this tonight, but the problem that Tony always articulates, and he's not wrong, is we have this really not hodgepodge, but crazy quilt of different geological conditions. And it would be like this massive study that probably wouldn't even have statistical power anyway to try to map that, That's like
Yeah.
mapping, when the butterfly flaps its wings in Africa, does a hurricane come, right? So that's not a good place to spend the money. What they did do is they created what they were calling polygons of similar geographies through those land records, because every time you dig a well, you do boring samples and perk studies. So again, if you digitize all that, there's a tremendous amount of legacy information that already exists.
Right.
And if we spend some of that money with this consultant, I think is the guy, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is the guy who has been helping Julie with the whole GPS project.
Yeah.
So you take that stuff and you overlay it into the GPS, and now you can say, for example, I don't want to, as an example only, like let's look at the 1 acre zone and the historical zone. Like let's just take a look at that. Let's look at what those wells look like, what those perks look like. That's indicative of a certain geology, and by the way, could you have density that's 2x, right? I mean, that's an important thing. So there's a bunch of things that we can do that are not really, they're a little bit time consuming, the consultants can do them, but they're not that challenging, and they would greatly improve the information that we have available.
Great.
So, and I was pretty, actually,
Yeah. It's
pretty
encouraging.
impressed that I think we could do that. And then we could, I guess, to just button this up, as it relates to MBTA, if we were to narrow down to, I think this is where we're going to go with this. So you narrow down to, again, I'm using the term polygons, and then Julie says don't use that word anymore, but it's clusters, like
Yes.
it's, zoning clusters that one might say have a MBTA complex. Now we've got this, so we can say, all right, let's look at that polygon. Let's look at what that looks like, and is that practical? Is that a place we even could have a cluster? So
Yeah.
I think we have to spend the money by June 30th, so the goal is to get it done,
Yeah.
basically this year.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, and we're a little over time on this, but just to finalize, the municipal vulnerability preparedness study,
Yeah.
we're moving forward to
That's actively moving.
actively moving out. And then caring community, we had studied and initiate plans for the Benfield property. Haven't really started on that.
No?
But that was one of our goals, so
Yeah.
we've got to keep that on the
Yep.
Yeah.
keep it on the list. Collaborate with the planning board to establish goals and path for MBTA communities.
That's working.
That's what you were talking about,
Yeah.
right?
We met today, and we're making those
And study the
clusters.
rental assistance program so that's kind of where we are, just to kind of all keep on track with what we're doing. All right, so with that, thank you for all that input. The ARPA discussion and review?
So I will, I'll be brief, and then there's certainly more detail that goes behind this, but I reached out to all the project owners that had active projects or unexpended funds to get an update on the status of their project, the nature of the unexpended funds, and basically with the goal of ensuring that we claw back any funds that are going to be unexpended in time that allows us to reallocate it to a positive use prior to the end of this calendar year. And ideally, in my mind, my deadline is like mid-October to be able to do that. So right now, if you look at the total official ARPA that's available to be allocated by the select board, we're at $98,233.69. So that's currently free and unencumbered to be allocated. That went up from last time simply because we officially closed out the kitchen project at Carlisle Public School, where we had allocated $40,000 that was ultimately funded through the lunch program. So we didn't need the ARPA funds for that. So that's come back. So we have that right now. And then there are a handful of projects that still require some additional information / refinement of what they think their unexpended funds will be. But among those, I estimate about $40,000 will be clawed back in, say, the next 45 days by end of September. That would give us around $140,000 of ARPA funds to allocate by the end of the year. In talking with Ryan, we also met and went through these. One need we know is Kelly had requested $5,000 to fund the audit that will be required because we're receiving ARPA funds. So there's a motion in there for that tonight. And then at least in our discussion and something we can discuss tonight, is if we have this balance of, say, $140,000, $135,000, $140,000, one potential use for that, almost the entirety of that funds would be the fire station OPM. We don't know the exact amount yet, but that's certainly a large funding use we could apply that to, and/or find some other uses. But the goal would be to get clarity on this number in parallel with when we're getting the cost estimates back for the OPM, so that we can make a decision at the same time on both of those.
Don't we have to have it encumbered by December 31st, or?
By end of calendar year, you have to allocate it. You don't necessarily have to spend it. So there are a number of projects that are going to continue to spend money that are either contractually.
Yeah.
That's fine. You just can't, January 1st of next year, we can no longer fund a project with ARPA, and/or if a project isn't going to use all its funds, it goes away. So we just want to make sure there's no question.
These other motions are things that we already counted. The money's already counted, right?
Yeah, so given all that, so there's really no major action to take other than, one, how does this committee feel about using the funds for the OPM, and/or do we want, is there another potential use that's on our radar now, or should be? We should make these decisions. Again, I want to leave time in case something goes sideways. I want to be in a position by, like, say, mid-October to fund these things. And if it's, the next meeting after that, that's fine, but I don't want to suddenly rush to have to allocate funds. So I don't know how people feel, if we want to discuss that tonight or discuss it once we get the information in.
Well, just on the motions you've got and what you just said.
Let me just walk you through the motions. So they don't pertain to that necessarily.
Right.
So there's three motions. One is, we had previously approved $140,000 for the Grant elevator.
Right.
There was a request to change the definition of that money to include all three elevators because of what Brian had talked about. So the first motion is simply to redefine and broaden the scope of a previously approved project that was limited to Grant to include 3 town elevators. And that's something that has been discussed with Ryan and the school and everyone.
Right, but as it relates to that, not the change in the motion, but
Yep.
we're allocating 140K on something that's going to cost $1 million. So is the 100, and then we have another 100, just coincidentally, there's this 140K left over that might go to the OPM, but should it go to the elevator? Because the elevator's way underwater.
So I don't remember it off the top of my head, but the elevator study is about 300,000
For all three?
to get just the study.
Just
and
the study.
Oh, the study.
So this would go to the
It
study.
designs everything. though.
So it's just everything, and to include bidding and construction management. So it's all architectural coverage. So the 140 would be spent first of the ARPA, and then you would use the MFC funds that were going to go to fix the elevator to finish that process, and then bring a final product to the town meeting. That's what the MFC decided. So this ARPA is vital to that mission.
But not additional ARPA beyond this 140.
No.
And then the actual $1 million to fix it would be a Springtown meeting article?
Yes. In the capital plan.
And the elevators will last that long?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, don't
No,
jinx it.
I met with Jim O'Shea about the school one, just given what happened there, and he's comfortable with that plan.
Right. And is
So
that-
there's a reason why this also includes the language of creation, project bid documents, and construction oversight, because that's specifically what this money would be going for.
But also, is it, if one of the elevators is the school elevator, that has to dovetail into, the library elevator that has to dovetail with that project, is the STM vote in time for that, how that mates up?
I hope so. But either way, it's going to get fixed.
Okay. All right.
So that's that's kind of the first motion it's the largest in money, but it's basically reallocating money that's already, or redefining a project that's already been funded. The second motion is just we may as well do it. It's Julie doesn't need the 2,000 of the 10,000 we allocated to the grant, and then the final is just the external audit. And then the next step of this will be at a future meeting in October, there'll probably be a list of 6 or 7 motions where we're clawing back funds.
Yeah, because I think we're not going to need the 10,000 for the matching grant for the,
That's one of them.
Yeah.
That, when you look at the 40,000,
Yeah.
there's a number of little things like that. Not little, but there's some open questions on those types of items, but those will all be resolved in the next month.
Okay.
So should we go ahead and do these motions?
yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'm happy to move, probably should do them individually.
Yeah, I would do
All
them
right.
individually.
I move to amend CPS Grant Elevator Modernization ARPA Project number 30001 to approve $140,480 in ARPA funds to be used to modernize the CPS Grant elevator, Town Hall elevator, and/or Gleason Library elevator. This includes assessment of existing elevators, creation of project bid documents, and construction oversight.
Second.
And I think you're on the committee, right? So should I second? Doesn't matter. Aren't you on the ARPA
We
committee?
don't have an ARPA committee.
Well, we do have a committee, but we haven't
This
been.
was not discussed by the committee or nor
Okay.
voted on
All
it.
right.
That's right.
Okay, we have
But you
a,
did the second. Or no, Kate, okay.
Kate did
Kate
never
did
mind.
it.
All right.
Is there any further discussion? Okay, we're all here, so just a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, none opposed.
I move to amend the MVP grant match, ARPA total budget, project number 17503 from $10,000 to $8,000.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor? Aye. All right,
I
none
move to
opposed.
approve $5,000 in ARPA funds to be used for the FY23 external single audit.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Yay. Okay, very good.
Unanimously.
Super quick, if you don't reserve the ARPA funds for the OPM, there is no funds for the OPM, so you would have to go to town meeting to fund the OPM,
Well, it
which
sounds
would
like
slow
we're-
that project down.
So that's a good reason to do it.
Yes,
And
okay.
is it your sense that this amount of money or something in close to that range will cover the cost of the OPM for the fire department, fire station?
It's a good start.
Okay. All right.
But it'll get you to some type of decision for Springtown
Town
meeting.
meeting, okay.
And keep it on track. Otherwise, you have to wait for funding.
Yeah, okay,
Okay.
good.
All right, so it's 9:20. I'd like to move on to the town administrator evaluation initial discussion. This is just
Bill?
Good night, Bill.
Thanks, Bill.
basically a brief discussion, but of the town administrator's goals and then our, kind of how we want to proceed with the evaluation. So, the goals were published in here. I don't know if the TA has anything you want to say about your goals or
Look at 'em.
or about this process.
Yeah, I'll put together something once we decide the process for all the select board about the goals.
That's what.
The part of the evaluation that was approved last year and that's been used for staff is goals. So you
here.
can pick, or I can pick, or someone picks the 3 goals that I'm evaluated on. I remember when we created these goals, it was supposed to be ambitious. Some of the projects have been sidelined, others we've done very well with. And then one I'm reminded that I said I would do and I didn't, which is the ADA assessment and adding that to the capital plan. It's 1,000 excuses for everything, but it's good to keep on track with these things. So also the form, so the TA report that's in there that I said was wrong was supposed to be the form for the evaluation, which is why it was in that section.
Oh, that's why that I was wondering what the heck
Yeah,
last
that's-
week's
That was
thing was.
my mistake. So the evaluation that we used for employees looks like this. We tried to keep it to, this is very similar to last year, but it's a little bit different. So last year you had about 8 rating categories and then goals. So we streamlined this for employees and we grouped up categories to allow the evaluator to have some choice. So the first section is management, leadership, and teamwork. The next one is attitude, judgment, dependability, creativity. So you can rate on any or all of those. Communication skills, resident or customer service, and then job knowledge and ability to learn. So we grouped it so it was just 5, and it gave you more flexibility for evaluation. Because the staff is being evaluated this way, I'm also comfortable being evaluated this way, but I wanted you to make that call and talk to me about it. So also included is the 3 goals. I'm pointing at it. It should be pointing up here. The 3 goals, and you evaluate on each goal, so it's 8. It's essentially 8 ratings.
And we would pick from these goals that you had, 3 of them.
You could, or I could pick, or we could pick.
Right. Okay.
I would really like all of you to pick 3 that you thought were important. I think that would be more meaningful to me in terms of getting feedback on the evaluation. But
Are the
Okay.
3 from this list of 10?
yeah,
List of 10, I have 5, I have
Well,
6.
each one has 2.
6.
It says 2.
Each one has 2.
Oh.
5 times 2.
That's
Your
12.
kindergarten.
Well, but wait, some,
I have
one has
6.
3,
No staff
oh,
goals?
I see,
Oh,
the
they're all
bottom
2.
one has
Oh,
3,
you're
but the
right,
others
you're
have
right.
2.
So there's
Okay.
11. There's 11.
And so when you say pick 3 of
Maybe
the
it's
the lined items, not the
No, 3.
13.
staff
I'm
goals.
sorry,
yeah,
there's-
or categories, or
There's 13 goals, you're right. I didn't
Okay.
get them all in my,
so the process last year was,
And the goal of this
to give
conversation.
some structure, the process was that I would provide you with a self-review and a review of my goals, and then each select board member did their own evaluation, and I met with each select board member, and then there was some consolidation of that into a public review.
By the chair.
Yes,
The chair was the only one that saw our individual
Right, right.
That's right.
evaluations,
correct.
and then put that into something for a public forum.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. How does the board think of that?
I mean, that part, I think, is almost statutory. I don't know if it's statutory, but it's good practice.
I thought it
Yeah, I
worked
thought it
pretty
worked
well.
well.
Yeah.
That part should not be that changed.
Okay.
The chair should,
It really is important, though, that you follow the
right,
format.
but you got to
of
follow the template,
The
right.
template, because,
Right.
and it's a fillable template, so you can just do it on your computer. But then for doing the scores later, if you didn't all score it the same way.
Yeah.
I thought there was one issue, though, relative to any comment that got in there. I had, as the chair, I couldn't just put my own, I couldn't cull out your comments. I have to put it all in there. I thought there was a question of that.
So my suggestion to you by OML, for the written evaluation that you send to Travis, that it be 1 bullet for each section that you find to be important, positive or negative, so that, because the chair can only consolidate the comments, they cannot.
Can't paraphrase.
Editorialize.
It can't, I don't understand. Consolidate versus.
You can't use
The chair
judgment
can
to
take
pick and
your-
choose.
Your comments and just
You
go.
can't pick and choose. You'd have to put everybody's comments.
Yes.
But he doesn't have to
that's
say
what-
who said what.
Right.
And that's what's made public?
And then you can make that public without discussing it publicly or in executive session, which there's really no executive session for it. So what was good last year was that a lot of the comments were meant for a one-on-one discussion and to go over and to
Yeah.
change. But you might not necessarily want that whole paragraph to be public, or
Right.
maybe you do, I don't know.
Right.
So it's just to be more thoughtful in what is sent to the chair.
I see. So you might,
In
In other words, you could have maybe 2 versions of this form,
Yeah.
one for the chair and one to take with you to your meeting with Ryan.
Yeah, yeah.
As notes that you might want to
I mean,
discuss with them.
And the one comment I'd have about that part, in terms of meeting with the TA, is I would urge us all to do our review that we want to discuss with the TA, do it ahead of time, to give it to the TA a day ahead or something, rather than, I just think it's a better discussion, right, if the TA gets a chance to think about it and be able to.
And you all did last year.
Yeah. I wanted to go back, though, on that form. So the part that you're saying, there'd be the scored part at the beginning, and then we'd pick 3 of these goals for the lower part where we're looking at those goals. But at the first part of this form, the very first item is staff management, leadership, teamwork. So I've been thinking a little bit about that and how we have our own experience of how you have been operated just from, our observation of seeing you in action, but we don't have any kind of mechanism to have any input from the people that you're managing. So I'm wondering if we should think about
Doing a 360.
some way of asking staff for input. And I don't know whether that means we have to, I don't know, create a set of categories that we would like staff to comment on or rate in some way, or is it, kind of one-on-one conversations with maybe just department heads? I don't know, but I think it would be worthwhile to get some input from staff. And maybe we can think about the best way.
I mean,
to do
you're
that.
advocating kind of a 360,
Yeah,
which is,
360.
Yeah.
yeah,
What I did-
sometimes done,
Yeah.
not often done by a senior executive to another senior executive.
Yeah.
It's generally, it's not always comfortable for the staff to be put in that position, I guess is what I'm
Well,
trying to say.
and then the question is, do you want to allow stuff to be anonymous, or, anyway, I just
No,
feel.
absolutely not.
Then, so I would just say, I think I want us to think about, A, do you think that is that something that's important for us to know more about, which is for those that are being managed by the TA, what is their experience? And do they have
Right, but will you get
suggestions
honest,
about?
what kind of, will you get honest input?
Well, or maybe it's not in a form, maybe it's some kind of way you get, you do one-on-ones. I don't know what the answer is, David, but
Yeah.
So I recently done this for an organization that I'm the president of the board, and the CEO asked me to do a 360, and we had a committee that was doing the evaluation, and one of the members of the committee is the one who did the 360. She went, and she's really good at, HR type of stuff. Anyway, she went and interviewed 3 or 4 of the staff, and then she wrote a summary of what she learned, and she sent it to the committee. So we could say, for instance, either the chair or the vice chair might want to do that if you really think it's important,
Right.
and then send that report to the rest of us. But this way, it's not anonymous.
right.
You're
So,
getting it,
what size, really large, or larger organizations like the 360, because they can, to your point, take lower level people and have them talk more openly, and they generally do sanitize that information.
Yes.
And then they bring it up to a group, and it's a piece of data.
Right.
Smaller organizations like this one and the one I run,
This is
you're not a good manager if you don't have a good understanding of how that person's up. I mean, that's a all year round, taking the feel, observing people. And my feeling here is we're pretty good right now about attending these events and talking to staff. And I feel, at least for me, I have a pretty good sense of how Ryan is viewed by the staff. I'm a little worried that when a board member, which we are, goes down into a staff and puts them on the spot, that first of all, that they would want that, and B, if they really have a beef, that they would share it with us. So I question I think it's incumbent, and we've made this comment before, it's incumbent for us over 12 months to get our own sense of how Ryan's doing, how effective we are as an organization, how the people respond, that's my view.
Okay. Well,
So
back to,
I'm not afraid of that, and I think it would help me in some way, but maybe to move it, I would suggest doing a pilot and seeing if it's valuable. There's 2 of us in town that are publicly reviewed, so I don't know, I'd want to just open that up to a public process, but maybe you pilot sometime. I would love that feedback, actually. But if it's not useful, then we
Yeah.
don't consider it again, and if it is useful, then we do.
I like that idea. I'd be willing to, work on something like that if the rest of the select board thinks it's worthwhile to try it.
I think that I just want to understand the process for that, because as, you know, this is a little different in that it's not, this is a public forum, and I respect that, and I, you know, want there to be public discussion, but I also understand that, you know, there are personnel matters and things like that, and I just don't know where, kind of, how you best navigate that in this scene. Just as he said, you know, you have two public reviews that are, I guess, public in this thing, and I you know, it's important that we, you know, ask the right questions and have the right process.
Well, there's also, I think we also have, I would say maybe there's 3 objectives. So the one-on-one where we prepare a review ahead of time and have a substantive and private discussion with Ryan, I think is important for us, for Ryan to get our direct, non-open meeting law feedback on what we feel, right? Constructively, let's assume, and also for us to hear from him on certain things that maybe, again, may not want to share an open meeting. So I think that's absolutely good practice, just from our working relationship with Ryan, his understanding of us and our understanding of him. The open review, the formal open review, which is sanitized, codified, whatever, I think is important as a benchmark. You know, it's a public point, and we're presumably happy with his performance, and it buttresses, you know, other decisions like what we do next time he has a contract, right? I mean,
Speaking of that, I'm sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt, but that is something we need to talk about.
Is that
as
coming
well,
up too?
Is
contract-
negotiating.
is it coming
No,
up?
but it comes up in February, I believe.
Of this, of 25?
We have to notify in 2025.
okay, right.
So we just
yeah,
don't
so you want that data point. You want, right, so you need that data, and we need consensus data. The third one is just the public, you know, to the extent they're interested, has very little insight into all the day-to-day stuff. And so seeing something about how he's doing and how we evaluate, I mean, that, at least my experience in the superintendent world, where there's a really formulaic way of doing it, that's pretty important, right? That's how the board looks at the chief executive, and people want to know that. So I think maybe lumping 2 and 3 together and just saying the public product has sort of a different mission than the private product. They're linked because obviously data is data, but they really serving 2 different purposes, and we should be clear in our own minds. You know, I think the first one benefits us and Ryan directly. The second one is really more for the public. It's a product for the public. It's not going to enhance our understanding of how the TA is doing. Is that clear?
Except it's how we understand.
It's how we get
How we
there.
understand how the other select board members feel about.
Maybe. Now you're skirting into OML world, so maybe not. I mean, that's not really the purpose, because now you're having a non-public meeting about it. I would keep that out of it. I would say you want to develop your working relationship
No,
with.
but what I mean is I haven't been through this process, so
Yeah.
the only time I see any feedback from other select board members, I have my conversation,
Right.
but I don't know what your conversations are.
Right.
And I don't know if my view aligns with your views,
Yeah,
right?
right.
And so I guess that the roll-up is the only place where I get any sense of.
Well, that gets to then if you have it specific for attribution, which I don't think we wanted to do, right? You can do that. That's a way to do it, but we didn't do that last time, right? We
No, we
didn't
didn't.
put comments for attribution. So
Maybe I just don't know
I would say if,
go through the
you know,
process to understand.
Yeah. If we do a 360, if one individual does that's 360 for the rest of us, I think one thing I would like to see is a set of questions that would be asked of the staff, and that we agree on the questions and what they are, and they should be very specific, and they should have to do with that one point that, as Barney was bringing up about this management, and make it clear to them that that's the only thing we're asking of them as well.
When is this process?
We,
It is starting now, but
yes,
it's,
yeah.
Like, when do you anticipate
February.
having like the sit-downs? That type of
we
thing?
did it in, what, December?
Okay.
Oh, it should be done by Thanksgiving,
Thanksgiving?
Why is that?
because then it rolls into my
It's the
evaluation
end
of
of the-
everyone else.
Oh, I see.
Contractually, you're supposed to evaluate me at the end of my year, and that was this week.
And the new your new contract, are we trying to get you on the same July 1 date for your next contract?
Ideally, we're trying to
Yeah.
align all contracts.
Yeah.
What's your now, it's August to August?
August 21st.
So so the renewal's a year from now?
A year from now. Yeah.
Right, okay.
But we talked, I don't know
We-
if
the
you remember,
notice is
we had
6
talked
months
about,
But assuming we say going
Maybe-
forward, then you have.
I just think we
Well,
need to have this as a plan.
I would
That's
move
what
it back
we're
rather
doing.
Right,
yeah. I mean,
timeline.
August is not that far from June 30th, so it would,
No, but the new contract will just be a little shorter.
that's right.
Yeah, no, that's not a big deal, but, so, all right, so
No,
back
it'd
to
be
this.
longer. We could, okay. If you get a new contract before the end of this contract, you do it by, he could have a new
We
contract
can do
by,
it that way, too.
Okay, back to Ryan's initial thing that he put up on the screen of the review. That was the first time I've seen it, but I thought I think that's reasonable, and it looked to me like, in keeping with what we're doing. The question is, do we want to, limit ourselves to a few goals here? I
the
think
goals
the
part,
goals?
yeah.
the goals to.
Why is that? Just to make it easier for
Why
you to
would we-
flow down to the other?
So my philosophy on goals for staff is to have 3 goals.
Yep.
They can have more than 3 goals, but 3 goals that I evaluate. So one of them is related to the master plan per your direction, one of them is department improvement, and one of them is self-improvement.
Right.
So that just allows them to focus. They can submit more, but I only evaluate them on 3.
But the 13 goals that you've got in here, they don't necessarily fit in those categories.
We
right?
don't, no.
So, I mean,
I have the 3 goals on the bottom that are my staff goals that
okay.
I submitted to my staff.
Yeah, but I mean, since there's lots of staff and one of you, I understand why that should be simplified. But in this case, it's the opposite way. There's lots of reviewers and only one reviewee. I don't know why we can't look at all the things you put on your slide. I mean, why not? It doesn't really matter. Those are what you or we mutually agreed on were the goals. Let's evaluate them on the goals. I mean, I don't think we need to downselect.
Right.
Personally, I don't think we need to.
Understanding that just like when we just looked at our own select board goals,
Yeah.
things change a bit
Yeah.
over time, and
So I would be comfortable putting all of those on. And then I like the form, the upper half of the form, which is more broad-based, like,
yeah.
I think it's fine.
How do you feel about that?
So would be rated on each one of those items, or just goals in general?
I'd rate them all, each of them.
Maybe
This
each
was what
bucket?
was shown to us before, right?
It's just math.
So we're just looking at this and evaluating you on the goals that, were put forward.
This would be 6 rating categories.
Is a goal the individual item, or can a goal just be like Carlisle character? Like, do you know what I mean? Like,
Could be that. Could be
because
that.
there might be individuals, I don't know. Yeah, having not been through the process, I don't know if those are not specific enough, or it's nice to just evaluate them on the kind of the pillars of the capital, or the master plan.
Well, and the last one too, how he manages.
Staff, yeah.
That'd be good. I'm okay with that too, that's fine. I think that's a compromise that's reasonable. The 5 master plan things and. your
Carlisle
staff,
character.
And how you manage your staff.
Financial sustainability. So we're not evaluating on the sub-goals, we're just evaluating you on that bucket, and we can use this.
You can speak to that. right,
Yeah.
So 6 rating categories plus the 5 up top.
Yeah,
Wait, what are the 5?
This would be 5.
it would be 6, because we
6
will add the,
staff goal.
the staff goes to 6.
The
There's
5
one
are-
up, there's one up here.
Oh,
So there's 5 rating categories plus goals, so then you would be at 11.
sorry.
So the 5
Okay,
things
got
that come
it.
out of the master plan,
Plus the
plus
staff
basically how
goals.
he manages his staff.
Okay. But let me ask a question then. So just refresh my memory, if you would.
Encourages brevity in
So
the comments.
what we would get your review of these goals first. We'd get from you your assessment of how you've done on these goals, and then we would do our own
Rating.
rating, and including the
comment.
top of the form, and then that's what we would get to you like the day before we were meeting with you and then discuss it.
Yep.
Is that the idea? Okay.
So the way we did it with staff is you had the 5 rating categories, and then they had their 3 goals, and there was a number for each, and that made a cumulative number.
Oh, you rated the goals, the work on the goals from 1 to 5.
So you could do the top half of the form, which is the 5 rating categories, and goals, and weight.
Well,
Maybe 60 or something.
But you're kind of, this has been an age-old thing. Like, this is not an SAT, right? So an aggregate score is, to me, meaningless anyway. It's really the substance of how did you do on your goals? And how are you managing your staff? And are you a learner, or, are you a constant learner? I mean, it's those things that matter. To me, the aggregate score is irrelevant. So I'm much less interested in the math that aggregates. I mean, that aggregates all categories. I'm interested in the
ratings.
The ratings across, to Scott's point, how we all land on each individual thing, and is there consistent? In the report, did you just, last year's, Kate, did we just average, or did you show a range?
Average.
I think it was an average.
An average, okay, all right. I mean, again, you can do it either way, but
But it's a question of goals. You said, oh, these 3, so you've narrowed it down to those categories.
no, let me rephrase. Ryan's moving to like a single, like, my SAT was 750. Aren't I smart? Like, yeah, okay, but how did you actually do on comprehension versus literacy versus this versus that? That's much more important.
This isn't a quantitative assessment, it's a
Right.
qualitative
It's a
assessment.
thank you. So I get it that we have to have a rating category because there has to be some consistency.
Yeah.
But the aggregation of that, of all the different categories together to single score
For his role.
is useless. It's useless. It's within, and you'd have to put up the thing again, but within Carlisle character, how do we feel he did, 1 to 5 or whatever it is? And if I thought he was a 3 and Barney thought he was a 5, but when Travis presents it, it's a 4, okay, it's within a point of what I thought. I mean, we'll get a sense, and he'll get a sense of where that landed, right? That's more useful. And the
It's just-
comments are useful.
Okay, but it just becomes very subjective as to, I may
course it is.
evaluate the financial, but I guess all this is.
It's all subjective. It's all subjective, and that's why I say, again, the use, I think, for us and Ryan is in the one-on-ones.
Right.
To me, I
It's
think
the
we should.
public that
we
will
should do
see,
more of
gee,
a
the board really
process,
likes him.
Like
Okay,
what we
great.
did with our own goals. Yep, you did this one, nope, you didn't do this one, but there were mitigating reasons, and this
Yeah,
one changed. I don't really, and there's too many. There- I mean, some of these are a yes, no. Did he do it? Did he not do it? Some of them, they're still working. How do you
You put
rate
the
something
form
that
in.
is still working?
And that's why I don't want to get
You know-
into like a laundry list. It's like, can we just rate them on
form.
the categories? How'd you do in the
Form
financial
first,
sustainability goals?
The
Yeah.
one that you
Yeah,
use
we
for
did a
your
good,
staff.
we did, you talked
Yes.
through them, but we're not, how'd you do on the published 5-year? How'd you do on, it's like,
I won
Why
this
can't
one.
we just do this publicly like we just did in our own goals
go-
and just have that as a
So
discussion?
Down to the goals, like, you score the goals too.
Yeah.
All right, I mean, what's your concern, Kate, on scoring each of these 6 things?
I don't mind scoring those guys. I think that's just an easy,
What's those guys?
in this form, the
The 6 goals?
Not the goals,
not
but
the
the
goals,
stuff above it.
the stuff above it.
All right, so don't score the goals.
But I'm not interested in scoring the goals.
All right, then don't
I'm
score the
interested in
goals.
discussing them and asking
Okay,
him.
so no score on that, that's fine, just discussing it.
We could say, well, what were the difficulties? What were the blocks?
Right, okay.
What were the impediments?
Listen, I'm fine with that.
What were the-
I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So again, we're saying the use is in the discussion with Ryan,
Yes.
and the public only needs to know we're happy he's made good progress on his goals.
So just, let's start at the top, that we're fine with that whole evaluation.
The top end.
The top
Evaluation
end.
from- yes.
The
Yeah.
staff, to attitude.
Sure.
And communication, and that's what
That will score that.
that is what
That's
we're scoring.
Yes.
Sure.
And then we're going to put this in there, and
Here are the goals.
Here are the goals.
And let's discuss them.
let's discuss them, but there'll be no scoring or
There'll
anything.
be no score. Right. You can put a comment, I think to the point made, I don't know, maybe it was Ryan made it, there's a discussion, and then we, after we've had that discussion, should distill that discussion into a single line for, don't want to be too prescriptive, but
Right.
some single pithy
Executive summary
things.
statement.
You know, Ryan worked hard at these goals, and these other ones, really, he wasn't his fault. I don't know, whatever it is, that you can aggregate to give.
But I have to aggregate what you give me, that's what the.
That's why you need to be pithy.
Right.
Right, so you don't want to book, but it's, again, it's not for, maybe to Scott's point, maybe there's a little bit of that that's helpful for, you know, people to hear what we had to say, but it's more, to me, that's more the public document that people could read on the mosquito and say, yeah, it looks like Ryan's doing a pretty good job at, you know, being a TA. The select board likes him. I mean, that's kind of it. There's a different school, which we've also done, where you actually put comments for attribution. And, you know, and each board member gets a chance in public to say what he thought, or she thought, sorry, but.
And we did some of that
We
did
last
that
year where we did
verbally.
it verbally
People
in the
were able to
meeting.
say what they wanted, even if it didn't.
And then
make-
you can say what you want, I guess. Then you don't have to, then you can leave it to the board to say what pieces of it.
So do we have a methodology? We're gonna
think so.
move forward with that
I hate that.
form,
Yep.
and then we're gonna attach the goals to the bottom, and we're not gonna rank them, but we can
Right.
discuss them.
And the goals are the
Like-
6 goals, not the,
The 6 goals, not the 12 goals or 13 goals, yeah, right.
The top,
buckets.
the top line, the descriptor, finance,
Well, again, if we're
sustainability.
not codifying it, I would just append this slide.
I would just
Say, discuss the
That's what I would-
slide.
That's what I would do.
how did you do on, how did you do on your goals?
That's doing your goals, right, exactly.
But we
And
are
have a
going to
one-
write something.
Ask for a, you know,
that-
1-2 sentence summary to
Yeah.
give to Travis.
Right. So the one goal is the goals.
Right.
Meet the goals.
But just so I understand this, then, sorry, but the section about goals, what we're going to get first is Ryan's
Self-evaluation.
self-evaluation
And
on
in that-
those goals. Then they come to us, and we individually
Right.
write up some response or what we think, and something written that is appropriate to then go to the chair.
For
Right,
After your
and then for
conversation.
public, and then,
Right.
then you have a one-on-one conversation, right, before
no,
you
you
submit
took
it,
it
you
out
have
of
the
sequence.
one-on-one conversation.
Well, you gave the sequences confusing.
Sorry, let me say it again, I got it.
Okay.
So Ryan does his self-evaluation, it comes to us.
All of us.
We review, each one of us gets it individually, we review it, we write our own comments. Those comments go to Ryan, then we have a meeting with Ryan to discuss it, and then those comments, we might change them based on that
Right.
discussion, right? And then those comments go to the
Or a
chair.
summary of
Who's
those.
gonna
A pithy
turn them
summary.
into
Summary
a
goes to,
summary.
Right.
summary goes to.
But let me, back to.
You're gonna take each of the
I
five
have
of
to, I
us.
have to take
right?
your
And then
comments.
you're turning it into a,
But I can't
can't edit
alter,
or
I
remove-
can't
That's
edit or
right.
remove them.
You just put them in aggregate.
It's not gonna be much that I have to do. I'm just gonna go.
right.
In
But
fact,
if, you know, but if
The way I
Kate
did it,
says-
I said, on the whole, everybody agreed that he did an excellent job in this, you know, such and such. And then if you put also a comment, and then here were some of the comments, blump, 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 blump. And then on this
Is that
evaluation
allowable?
category,
Anything
you know,
he sends
the,
gets published in the final roll-up. He can't
well,
make a
that's
decision.
different than
and-
what we did last year. So
But he can't
Kate's
make-
describing last year.
He can't say, oh, I'll include this, but not this. He can't
Right.
editorialize.
Everything gets included or nothing gets
So
included.
whatever you send him is going,
Right.
you're basically, he's just a middleman, basically.
But it doesn't say, Kate said this, and,
Right.
No,
transcribe them.
nothing's attributed.
but you then can turn to each board member for commentary in the public
In the
meeting.
public, verbal
Yeah.
commentary.
Verbal commentary, if they want to
Sure,
embellish, right.
sure.
Let me go back to the step one of Barney's sequence.
yeah.
I think Ryan's self-eval of how he did should be a public document. It should be given to the board in a public meeting. Because that's a piece of, you don't have a problem with that, do you?
It would be much different.
It would be much different?
What he wrote.
So just one thing, I'm not trying to sway any
Yeah.
evaluation or anything, but the difference between the evaluations that you're used to and mine is that mine are public forever. So any employer I'll ever have, or anybody that ever wants to see my evaluations will get to read it. So I'm not going to be as forthright in
Okay, well,
public
then never
document.
mind, then never mind. I take it back.
Right.
And I don't like that, it's just reality.
No,
So when
there's some
someone
things
reads
you-
a mosquito, they're gonna be
Yeah.
like, the town administrator is a 3.9, and they're gonna stop reading. They're not gonna look at the nuance of the,
Well, that's all the more reason we don't like to give a numerical score. Okay, so I think, then I agree with your process.
Okay, so one last time to recap, we're going to use that form for the beginning, the 3 kind of evaluative goals, and then we're going to have these goals underneath, and then we're going to have you all submit to me those things. And knowing that when you submit it to me, I'm publishing them.
But in the form, just to clarify, in the form where it's like goal 1, goal 2, goal 3, we're just gonna have a goals. We're not gonna have,
It's just a discussion.
Right.
Discuss goals.
Right.
it's not, we're
Not to
not
be
listing out
scored, no.
6 goals.
No, but that'll be an appendix, that's what I
Right, but
think,
it's
when you
just-
sit with him, you'll say, well, gee, Ryan.
It's just a goals section, right?
Yes.
Does this fit what the TA had looked for in an evaluation in this process?
I think so. It's putting a lot more weight on the individual categories, but
Individual categories
What's
of
the
what?
top?
In the top section,
Yeah, I
Top.
see.
so again, I'm not like trying to be pithy, but the,
I hope you are trying to be.
Yeah, pithy,
Pithy's
short.
good.
oh,
Short.
I don't know what that means. So the,
Short.
short, concise.
people aren't going to read your goal review, they're just going to look at the score. Right? That's what's going to be published. That's the first sentence in the mosquito.
Hmm.
So I hate caring about that, but I do.
That's partially why I would like to have the goals discussed, us just discussing the goals,
Right.
and how we, and with, almost even in
What he's looking,
public.
what he's trying to say is he's looking for a number, and I sympathize with you, but I don't think it's useful for us to.
Well,
Or what he's saying is there will be numbers, and what people will focus on now is
It's a
the
number
numbers that
rather
are
than
maybe
the-
even not the most important part of the
Yeah, 'cause-
review, it's the goal.
Well,
It's
is
like-
it? No, but
it's
no,
like-
no,
I don't know.
Is that true?
I don't know
mean,
if it's true.
the overarching things at the top, why did you even put those in the form for your own employees? Because those are important. You keep pulling the form off, but that form,
I want to see you,
the top of that form,
because theirs aren't public. Dave.
I'm
That's
just
the
going to
thing.
say, so
I
they're not
know,
made
but it's
public.
obviously important, right?
Yeah.
I mean, communication, staff management, leadership, attitude, dependability. I mean, those are things that are overarchingly important. Whether he did or didn't procure a
Meet the
police and
particular
fire station
goal.
conceptual plan is useful, but it's less important about him, I would say.
I don't want to belabor this discussion, but if that's important, the score, can we just put a goal score and make it 50% of the grade?
Sure, fine, great.
Is that,
That's a lot.
is that?
No, I don't know, that's like a huge change in what we just,
No, it's
well,
just.
no, I
it's-
mean, this. so
He's
what?
saying you don't want to just have the goals reduced to a non-numerical score, because no one's going to pay attention to that part of it.
he's saying at
Extra.
the top 3,
Saying
it
the reason
places a
there's
lot of
multiple
weight.
categories is to
Because you don't
allow
want to
you
get hammered on one particular category. Right, but do you,
So
Okay.
if goals are going to be 50%, then I'm not going to do this because I believe in myself, but it incentivizes your next TA to make less goals that are achievable.
right, make low ball. So what is the appropriate weighting of the goals then?
That's why I want to discuss them, just, what were the,
I liked the broad range, and
He
then you
doesn't
can
like that,
pick
'cause
which goal categories you thought were important.
I
And
see what you're saying. So maybe we,
Making it way more complicated than it needs to be.
so can we just, maybe we just go back to a goal for each bucket, and there's 6 goals, and we can discuss each one? Would that be better,
No, I-
to address the concerns you have?
I was really just talking out loud. I'm really not concerned about my review.
He's going to get a great review. It's irrelevant. It's going to be a great review.
No, but we're setting in motion a process that's going to be followed,
Right.
So
It's not- right.
we want to make sure
Not so
we're.
much about
I
Ryan,
think the
it's about the
problem
TA
is the
evaluation.
disconnect between this and the 3 goals on that. So could we maybe just decide somehow on just 3 goals out of these that go onto that?
Be
And
our-
let Ryan decide what those 3 goals are, that he would like to have evaluation on.
That's okay. Let him do that.
Or just add goals as a 6th category, generally.
6.
Oh.
Sixth, where do you get
What are
to
the
six?
3? I thought
Because
you
what
only
have you got
3.
up here? You've got 4 or 5?
5.
Oh.
How did you get to 5?
1, 2, 3.
The
Oh,
bold.
okay, 5 in goals.
You want to add a
Yeah.
goals?
Isn't
And
that
then
what?
the fifth
that's what
one
you-
is,
That's what Scott just said, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And the
that's
sixth
what-
Goals
one-
category.
Goals, and you can score it, and then if you.
and you
if-
can weight the score
My-
if you wanted
I thought
to.
you were saying you're concerned that these less important parts get, anyway, yeah, we can add goals and then,
Okay,
Put a
Right
score
now,
on
you
it.
do, you do straight math. You just add each one as a, each one of these has a 16% weighting or whatever.
Yeah.
I think we need a.
but I
working
don't want to
group.
score these individually.
So you're scoring them as a package.
Yeah, we're
Package.
scoring
As a
Package.
package.
This
Okay,
becomes
that
the
makes more
sixth
sense.
of the things.
Number
It's
six.
TA
Okay.
goals,
Okay.
and you give a numeric rating
Right.
1 to 5
Gotcha.
on that, and
Yeah.
that counts in the total averages, so you have,
Right.
okay.
And that's
I think
probably
that's a
where we'll have
great,
more
I
robust-
like
with
that.
that? With
I'm
that?
good with that.
I'm
Are
good
you?
with that.
Is the TA,
We did it.
All right.
Okay,
with
so it's
that?
not goal 1, 2, and 3, it's just goals,
Right.
With a rating
and
now.
with a rating. Okay,
Okay, and then
And-
our commentary.
okay.
Brief commentary.
And brief
TA would
commentary.
share with me the final document here, I'll just take a look at it.
Right. You have, the chair has the final authority to add it.
All right.
Yes, okay,
Now,
thank you.
sorry, I don't mean to prolong the discussion, but
Nobody does. Everybody does
do you
anyway.
want to have any kind of a pilot of getting staff input?
I do
Oh,
not.
The 360 type of thing?
I don't, I do not. I encourage members to talk to staff
And
throughout
I
the
think
year.
If you wanted to share input, I think on a one-on-one, you can always do that, right?
Right.
Or
Yeah.
if there's,
You mean share it one-on-one with the TA?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, is there any, through HR or personnel, I mean, I haven't worked in a big organization other than nonprofits where this is really haphazard a lot of the time. Is there anything in our internal process that allows us, where a staff member is invited by, I guess, the personnel director in some sort of a process to provide input? To be a way for them to give feedback to the,
We're testing
TA.
things, but there's 3 feedbacks that we've tried to implement. So one is coffee with the select board member was an initiative we did. We also did, we do small group meetings at different levels of the organization with the assistant town administrator rather than me to try and get some feedback. And surveying, we do some surveying as well.
Of staff.
of the whole staff, with just open-ended questions about how they're feeling about working here, or?
Yep.
Yeah,
Do we need to
Oh,
look
yeah,
at our
exit
HR
interview.
policy about,
exit interview.
chain of command grievance, if you have any kind of complaint or
Is there a
something?
grievance procedure?
A grievance procedure.
Ombudsman or what?
We do have one, but the hierarchy here is very flat. So
Yeah,
it's-
What is it? It would typically be like Aubrey, right? Would be the ombudsman.
well,
Yeah,
I guess the
right.
question is
She's
when,
not
I
great.
mean, you can't be you, because it might be about you, right?
Right, or her.
or
Oh, it sounds
they
like-
could come to us. And I guess the question is it clear that they could come to us and what it would take to
How
get
would-
to us?
In a public meeting?
No, they would have
Don't you
to.
have it? Isn't that in our
Privately.
HR? We don't have that in our HR policy?
I'm just trying, I wrote.
So let's take a look. I mean,
I
we're
think it
wrapping,
is.
No.
I think
it's
it
10
is.
o'clock and we're wrapping all
Yeah.
kinds of stuff.
All right, thank
I think
you
let's
all.
get this
I've gotten
done.
us off track, so.
Let's get this done.
All right.
and-
Well, luckily, we've done
I
most of the
know,
other
we've done
stuff.
all the others, except
self-service
finishing
Budget
the TA,
count, the budget count,
all
yeah,
go
the
for
TA
ice cream.
report.
TA report.
Let's
Yeah.
wrap.
My neck is getting stiff from bending
In
side.
my town administrator report, you have the fall town meeting calendar
Yeah.
and the FY '26 budget calendar. So that's a working document, that's not a solid document. The main thing you want to consider is when you want to have the annual town meeting.
Next
That does
spring.
set a lot of the dates.
Yeah.
The key dates for the fall that you should be concerned with is, in early October, you'll get your financial forecasts and your capital planning reports. Then you'll be doing goals with the finance committee. Then departments will get their budget, and you'll get a draft budget from me in December. And then,
Sorry, is that in here somewhere, this, yeah, I'm just trying to find it, what you're reviewing, okay.
It's
It's,
down on,
PDF 27.
26, 27. yeah.
Okay,
Okay, that looks good.
thank you.
it's exactly the same as last year with different dates.
Oh, I see, fall town
Yeah, May
meeting
6th.
calendar, okay.
Right, to,
And
Let me
this May 6th, has it already been checked with school or anything? No, you just kind of picked it out of that. Okay.
That's
Picked
the
a
town election.
semi-historical date and
Yeah.
set some dates.
Well, we've had our town meetings all over the map, and we've had them in April, we've had them in May. April's always tough because of the holidays and the vacations and the,
And I strongly advocate a budget process bylaw at some point to codify those types of things, so you don't have to make it up each year.
yes.
Yeah.
Fall outreach efforts.
Governance Committee tried to write one and got shut down.
September 10th, I'll be doing my first fall coffee hour after a break this summer. And then we're doing an initiative called Town Hall in Center Park, where we're bringing town hall officials to Center Park to meet with residents. One of the biggest draws is going to be the touch-a-truck for the DPW and the police department. So each department that's participating has something that they want to talk to town about. MBTA communities, for me, it'll be the fall town meeting if there is one, or the annual town meeting. And the DPW and police are going to do kind of a mini open house at Center Park. And then we want to talk about Center Park because it's beautiful. Road repair, quick picture for you and the public. This is Church Street and School Street. They said that paving is complete, and they did meet their timeline to be ahead of school opening, so that was positive. The rest of the roads, which include Curve, Proctor, Prospect, and River, will be completed the first week in September, right after Labor Day. Greeno Barn is nearly complete. I went there today with my daughter. She was impressed, kind of. Here is the cupola that was on the top. So most people estimated the cupola to be about 8 feet, and it is apparently about 20, so it is huge, 750 pounds or so.
Somebody's taking that?
And it,
We're making that information.
It's going to the
yes.
society.
Historical Society is going to restore it and turn it into a kiosk. The only thing left is the foundation of the middle section. The middle section has been completely dismantled, labeled, and moved. So the only thing left is the foundation for that. They're going to come, take out the rest of it, recycle that material, and then bring it to conservation grade and loam and seed.
Awesome.
Almost done. Westford Street Culvert is done. That's a big win. The Corey Auditorium electrical construction is on schedule, thanks to Jeremy. He will not let it come off schedule, so we feel pretty good about that, especially since we don't pay Jeremy. He's just a really strong-hearted and smart volunteer. Dog park mobilization has begun. You'll start to see tree clearing and then eventually construction of the dog park. The goal is to complete that by November and to meet some planting timelines in October, so that should move pretty quick. And we had a lot of people at the Central Burying Grounds for tree work, grave restoration, the entrance pillars, tree work, and the Litchfield seat.
The Litchfield seat.
Litchfield seat repair. One thing that we're talking about with the Historical Commission is using some of the Greeno Barn slate to redo the Litchfield seat rather than to do asphalt.
Great idea.
Yeah, much better.
Maybe, maybe not. At least 60 gravestones will be restored. We have a really good, a lot of solicitation of bids, so this project should be good. Special thanks to Chrissy O'Shea for working very hard on this as a volunteer. We talked about all the building construction projects already. Rotary signs. We did approve rotary signs for the Middlesex County 4-H Fair, the annual Democratic Town Committee picnic, and the 6th grade spaghetti supper. One thing, we did have a sign that was put on the actual rotary itself, and we had a complaint about it. I walked by it and totally spaced on it. So in the future, we will not allow signs in the rotary, only in the outskirts, which is part of your policy. We talked to a lot of people about that. So it's a war memorial. It has a lot of things, so we just want to keep signs off that. Thank you to the person who brought that to our attention so that we can fix it.
Does that mean you keep people off of it too? I mean, there are people who sit there.
Right.
I don't think so, because of A, free speech, and B, I think war memorials are supposed to be visited, but that's not in our, I don't know what the policy is there, so. Something to consider.
I think it's for us to consider at some point here. Not tonight.
Not tonight. Staff recognition, so there's a letter in your packet praising Bill Linehan
Yes.
for, he's the VSO that's part of our district in Bedford, but he helped a Carlisle resident, and that went to the town manager in Bedford, so I wanted to share it with you as well. Our team does a great job, Karen and Bill. Karen is the one you see here. She's here every week providing services to veterans, and she's an excellent VSO. I used to work with her when I'm a VSO, so I know that personally and watching it in practice. Some upcoming dates. I did get that scholarship to go to the ICMA conference in Pittsburgh, so I'll be missing a couple of days in September. And other than that, it's just select board meetings and potentially the fall town meeting in November. To quickly review the upcoming calendar
Upcoming agenda?
agenda. Words are escaping me.
It's getting
Wait, I
late.
got us off
Wait,
track.
before we do that, Ryan, I see here there's a motion to approve the fiscal year 2026 budget calendar. Did you want that voted on?
I don't think we should do that tonight.
Yeah, I don't think we should.
Okay,
I have general consensus from you that the calendar's okay, so we can move forward
okay.
with the Finance Committee. The Veteran Celebrations Committee is going to come to you, talk about some markers they're putting into the Central Burying Ground, and give a 250th update. Going to review potential fall town meeting warrant articles, potentially. Friends of Center Park agreement, hopefully we can get that to an end point. Talk about your goals again, maybe, and there's an open spot in here for a big item yet to be identified.
Great.
Well, maybe something, or will we be ready on the fire OPM? No,
No,
not that fast, okay.
Chair will look at it and fill this.
Fill it.
The other thing I think it would be helpful if the chair and the TA look at is the schedule of meetings and decide now, if we're going to do extra meetings, or it ends with the November town meeting, right? That list at the end of your TA report. I would stretch it out through the end of December, because if we only have one December, anyway, right, to really look at what we need to get done,
Yep.
and because it'll be helpful to the rest of us to know if we're doing extra meetings.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's my report. Report complete.
Right.
Great. Okay. I think we've gotten through everything except community input at this point. If there's anyone from the community who wants to ask questions or offer input. All right, seeing none in the audience or on Zoom, I would take a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.